have the full board. I haven't seen Rhea hop on yet, but hopefully she will join us shortly. But we will get started in the meantime. We'll start with our new call to order, call the meeting to order. Pursuant to subsection 403A of the 1 MRSA, we will now confirm that each member of the RSU 5 Board of Directors can both hear and be heard. We will do this by calling the roll. Members present, please answer by saying yes. We ask all other members to listen and report any audio difficulties when the roll call is complete. Before I actually do the roll call, I'll just remind folks that for the Zoom meeting, we ask that people keep their audio on mute unless they are speaking. So for board members, you raise your hand and we'll do it as we've done for the past several meetings in the order that the hands go up. We'll have 2 public comment periods during this meeting this evening. And so for anyone other than the board members that has something that they wish to say during those public comment periods, when we announce it, if you could just raise your hand using the functionality in, if you click your participants, there's a little raise hand, a little blue hand, and that will let us know that you want to be, you have something to say. And we just ask that you tell us your name, where you're from, and keep your comments to 3 minutes. And there will be 2 opportunities for that in this evening's agenda. One towards the beginning on number 7, and then again later on in our budget, after our budget conversation and our other items that we'll be discussing this evening, number 15 on the agenda. So sorry, just wanted to get that out before, because I know we have a bunch of new folks that are joining us this evening on the call. So just wanted to get that info out for folks. But we will get back to the roll call for the Board of Directors. Kate Brown.
Yes.
Jeremy Clough.
Yes.
Kendi DeSipkis. I know she's on here.
Just you have to unmute.
Yes.
Thank you, Candy. Lindsay Fertney.
Yes.
Jen Galetta.
Yes.
Susanna Hancock.
Yes.
Beth Munson.
Yes.
Mara Pillsbury.
Yes.
Vali Steverlink. I know we saw her. Did she disappear? Uh-oh. I don't see her on. Maybe she had to disconnect and will rejoin us. Well, when we see her pop back in, we'll make sure she can hear us. And we can hear her. Maddie?
Yes.
And has Rhea joined us yet? No, so hopefully she'll be able to join us as well. So now we'd just like to ask if a member of someone other than a member of the board who we just heard from, so a member of the public who's watching, would mind unmuting themselves for just a moment and letting us know that they can hear okay. And just a reminder that if you can't, if you're having trouble during the meeting, you can use the chat function at the bottom if you are having some technical difficulties, and we'll try and keep an eye on that and make sure that everyone can hear the proceedings.
Hi, this is Aga Dixon, your attorney, and I can hear you.
Great, thank you. All right. All right, so we've gone through the attendance and we will move on to the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it Yeah. Okay. So I would take a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes from the April 29th, 2020, as presented, barring any errors or omissions. Thank you, Susanna. Second from Maddie. Oh, I gotta find my, already lost my roll call list for votes. All right, so we have a motion and a second, so we'll do a quick vote. Kate,
Yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
Candy,
Yes.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Jen,
Yes.
Susanna,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
Mara.
Yes.
I vote yes. Is Valley back? Have we gotten Valley back?
I'm
Okay,
here. Yes.
wonderful. Maddie,
Yes.
and what about Rhea? Not yet. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And so we will move on to number 5, adjustments to the agenda. Becky?
Yes, we have 3 adjustments to the agenda. I'd like to add a 9C, the update on graduation, a 12C, revisiting the school calendar, and 14B, hiring of a 2nd grade teacher at Moore Street School.
Okay. All right. So the next on our agenda is good news and recognition. This is typically where we would get the report from our student rep. With her not on, hey, Jen Gulko, you have anything you want to share? Sometimes you fill in for them. Or are you good?
Hi, everyone. I think this was also Rhea's last meeting, so I'm hoping that she is coming since if it's her turn, then the last meeting in May would be Liam's turn. So I'll be sharing information later in the meeting, as Dr. Foley said, about graduation. There's lots of good things that are still happening. Kids are plugging through their work. Seniors have gone on to their senior projects, and some were able to salvage what their original project was. One of the ones that we just heard from was a group of girls who their project was to raise chickens from baby chicks all the way to chickens, and then to slaughter the chickens and cook the chickens and serve them at Pine Street, and they were able to still do that. So they delivered the chickens and the meals, and just did a phenomenal job. The other update is that last week was our first week of holding advisory sessions for all students in all grades, 9 through 12, which we'll do every Friday for the rest of the school year. So not sure what else Rhea was going to share. I know that they're still working on events like Cabaret is still going to happen. One of our students, Bella St. Cyr, is organizing that virtually. We're still looking into all our ceremonies like the JMG ceremony, the National Honor Society, our academic awards. And clearly it's not the same doing it virtually, but we're still going to try to recognize all the amazing accomplishments of our students. I think that's it for now.
Thank you, Jen. Okay, so we are up to the first public comment period on our agenda. So quick reminder, if you'd like to share something with the board, we ask that you use the raise hand function in Zoom, which is if you click the participants down the bottom of your screen, you'll see a column show up on the right, and there's a little blue hand that says raise hand. If you click that, that lets us know you had something you'd like to share, and we'll call on you in the order that we see the hands. And just ask that you share your name, where you're from, and comments are 3 minutes. I don't see any, but I'll give folks just a second. Oh, we do have one. Oh, Michelle Bossy. So I think you can unmute yourself and just carry on from there.
Hi, Michelle. This is John Egan. I'm actually using Michelle's computer at my
Sneaky.
house. I hope you like my beautiful self-portrait on the Zoom picture. I wanted to just provide, I guess, a little bit of feedback that I'm on the Freeport Town Council, and our budget process is a little bit later than your process, and we're just going through finalizing our operating and our capital budgets for the town of Freeport, and had a brief conversation with Dr. Foley earlier about the efforts that you and your group are trying to do for trying to find some additional ways to reduce the impact of the school budget. And I applaud that effort. I thank you for taking a look at that. The town of Freeport actually is getting ready to pass a operating budget that is just a few dollars under what we passed last year. So it'll be a slight negative operating budget. Our capital budget is paid for entirely out of reserves. So there's no tax burden on our capital budget, which is also being reduced. And the purpose of that was to do what we could as a community to reduce the impact eventually on our taxpayers. And I know that that's a prime concern of the RSU board. And so I just wanted to give you that feedback. We recognize your budget is considerably larger than what the town of Freeport has in front of it, with a lot more dynamics. And you've got organized labor costs, you've got a number of facilities, way more than the town has. So they're not an apple to apple comparison at all. So I recognize that, and I wanted to reflect back to you that the Freeport Town Council recognizes that. And so any efforts that that you as a group can come to try and reduce or minimize the impact of an escalating cost to educate our children in the RSU is certainly appreciated. And I guess, you know, it's a fine line, because the efforts right from the beginning, and I've not been a part of them as much this year, been following it somewhat from a distance, not participating in your meetings, but I know that the process that you go through is already directed and focused on delivering the most efficient methods and means for educating the children in the RSU. So I know there's not a lot of places to look at in the current budget, but I applaud your efforts to go back and do that anyways. So we're trying to do our part in our community, which is just one portion of the RSU, of course, to frankly provide a little bit of room in the overall tax burden, because we recognize that there's likely going to be some increment of increase from the RSU overall budget process. If for no other reason, then, you know, it's significantly larger than anything else in the town's overall complex tax bill. So I'm probably out of my 3 minutes, but I'm just reflecting back to you that we are supporting your effort. Thank you for taking another look at this. It's not an easy job, and I would certainly applaud any efforts you can to find additional savings in what you're presenting for the FY21. Thanks.
Thank you, John. I don't see any other hands up at the moment. Okay. So just a reminder that there will be another public comment at number 15 when we get there on the agenda. Okay, so reports from superintendent. We do not have a report this evening, so we will move on to administrator reports. And the first one is the RSU 5 solar presentation. And I know she's on because she shared it with us already that she was here. I'll
go.
You're going to start? Okay, perfect.
So as you remember, back in March, we kind of presented to you, Dennis Willett is heading up the Sustainability Committee, a proposal to enter into a solar power agreement. And you okayed it in concept, and you wanted us to go back and have our attorney review it. And so she has done that, and she is here tonight to help answer any of your questions and to kind of present the pros and cons of this, because it's not a vote that we should take lightly, because it's entering into a contract for 20 years. But I'd like to introduce you to Aga Dixon from Drummond Woodsum, and she has viewed the proposal, and now she'll go over it with you and answer any of your questions. So Olga, I think I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Foley. I'm very happy to be here with you this evening. The first thing I would like to share with you is that coming in second is not always desirable, but in the case of contract negotiations, it's really great and beneficial. The upshot of it is that school departments, school districts other than yours have asked us to review essentially the same contract a few months ago and took the laboring or and the legal fee hit for that review. So I'm very pleased to tell you that this has gone through several legal reviews now, and your bill is not going to be all that much consequently. Just by way of background, I'm happy to just give the presentation and then take questions after the fact. But if you find that I'm repeating things you already know, please, raise your hand or stop me, and I'm happy to modify this. I want to be sure that you fully understand the framework that this contract is based in and the mechanics of the contract so that you can make a well-informed business judgment, hopefully tonight, about this proposal before you. So as a starting point, you are probably aware that the Maine legislature enacted a whole host of bills last year, one of which was dubbed the Green New Deal. And as part of this renewable energy package or suite of laws, the legislature enacted incentives to allow customers of CMP and Emera up north to take advantage of net metering or net energy billing. And the way that this works is best understood if you think about your own CMP bill. So the RSU is in CMP territory, just like every homeowner in the town of Freeport and then the RSU's district. The RSU gets a monthly bill from CMP. And if you've looked at your own bill at home carefully, you'll see that the bill is actually probably composed of two parts. The first part is the cost of the electricity that you are purchasing. And the second part is the cost of the transmission and delivery of that electricity to your home. That is no different with the RSU. What is a little different is that in many instances, just like you as a homeowner can competitively purchase your electricity supply, the RSU can do so as well. And if you don't do anything as a homeowner, you get what's called the standard offer, and that is a price per kilowatt hour that you pay for your electricity supply that is established by the Public Utilities Commission every year after they go through a procurement process and they pick the most advantageous competitive supply provider. As a school department, you can go out on your own and also competitively purchase your electricity. But at the end of the day, those two fees, whether you are charged by CMP or whether you're charged separately by a competitive electricity supplier, those two fees remain a constant. So you pay for your supply of electricity and you pay for the transmission and delivery of that electricity to your buildings and to your campus. Nothing about the power purchase agreement changes that framework. So the power purchase agreement is asking you to, in addition to your CMP bill and your electricity supply bills, to enter into an agreement to purchase a percentage of the output of a solar farm that is going to be built somewhere in CMP territory. Now, why would you do that? You've already bought your electricity through a competitive electricity supplier. You can't do much about your transmission and delivery costs that CMP charges you. The only reason it makes financial sense to enter into an agreement like this is because of the legislation that was enacted last year. And under that legislation, when you as a customer of CMP purchases a financial interest in a renewable energy supply source like a solar farm, that purchase is transformed into a dollar value that is then that you can then use and apply against your CMP bill, essentially a credit that you can apply to either the supply or the transmission and delivery part, or any portion of your CMP bill for that matter. So the reason that this is a financial, that there is a financial incentive to enter into these agreements is because it occurs when the cost of the renewable electricity that you buy under the power purchase agreement is lower than the credit you receive, and you can apply that against your current bill. Does everybody follow that? Okay. So as a starting point, just bear in mind that you will still have your CMP bill. You'll still have to competitively purchase your electricity. This is an add-on. And the reason it makes sense is because of this net metering law that went into effect. So what I've included in your package, you have a proposed vote. And I'd like you to turn to the last page of that vote, which is titled Exhibit 1, Anticipated Cost Savings for Year 1. And what I'd like to do is walk you through that calculation, not necessarily to dwell on the numbers, but to really hone in on the assumptions and variables that are built into these contracts, so that you understand at the end of this discussion the risks that you are taking and the rewards that you may be receiving. So if you think about how to calculate the savings, how to figure out whether this is a good financial deal for the RSU, there are really 4 components to make to that analysis. The first part is understanding your own usage of electricity and how that may change over time. So as a starting point, we look at your prior historical usage of electricity and the cost of that electricity usage. And that's shown in blue at the top of that exhibit. But there are, in using your historical data to project your future data, you're making a whole host of assumptions about what the future may hold. And this, as we will discuss shortly, is essentially a 25-year contract for you to consider. And you can imagine how difficult it is to anticipate what your electricity usage may be 10 years, 15 years, 20, 25 years out from today. So to avoid over purchasing electricity, what we do is we incorporate a buffer so that you never purchase 100% of your projected future need. The reason for doing that is because under the net metering law, the credits you acquire on your CMP bill have a life to them. And that life is basically a year from the date that you acquire them. So you can roll over the credits from month to month, but after a year, if you don't use them, you lose them. So you maximize your savings by making sure that you never over purchase the electricity from a renewable source. If your intention is to take full advantage of the net metering law. So you'll see in the blue, I talk a little bit about how difficult it is to project your future electricity needs. I've spoken with Dennis and Superintendent Foley about what your projected needs are. I ask questions like, do you plan on building a new school in the near future? Do you plan on closing buildings? Are you intending to create, to do any energy efficiency projects in the next few years? Do you plan to install heat pumps? All of those variables and all of those answers will either ratchet up your projected need or ratchet it down. And based on those discussions, Dennis recommends that you adjust your purchase to be equivalent to 75% of your historical cost of electricity. So the $290,000 and change is 75% of your of last year's usage, electricity cost for the school department. The other thing to keep in mind, and as you're thinking about assumptions and variables, is that the cost of delivery and the cost of supply are not fixed. So as I mentioned, the rate for supply is set by the PUC every year, whether it's the standard offer or whether you go out to competitive bid, that supply charge could go up or down in future years. And likewise, the delivery rate is set by the PUC. It's pegged to the market. Both of those things are pegged to the market, to the broader electricity markets, and those numbers are adjusted at least annually, and the standard offer is adjusted once a year as well. So those are additional variables to keep in mind. So you have a nice cushion here by purchasing 75% of your historical usage. You know that if those variables change in the future, again, you have a buffer so that you don't overpurchase. The second part of the calculation is to figure out what the value of your purchase is. In other words, what the value of your credit is as it's going to be applied to the CMP bill. And the legislature established a formula that the PUC adopted into its rulemaking. And the way, without going into the gory details, the formula is composed of two parts, both of which are the subject of PUC procurement process. So if the first part is the delivery component of 75% of CMP's delivery rate. And again, that piece is adjusted annually. And then it's the 12-month average of CMP's standard offer for every given account class. And in your case, it looks like most of your accounts are in the medium class, but you have most of your accounts are in the medium class and you have a little bit in the small class. So when you take those tariff rates, which is what the credit value is called under the law, and you blend them, you get an average blended net energy billing credit value of roughly 13 cents per kilowatt hour. So what that means is for every kilowatt hour of renewable energy that you purchase from this solar farm, you will get 13 cents per kilowatt hour as a credit against your CMP bill. And we want to make sure that we size the project in a way that you're purchasing $290,000 worth of credits. That again is 75% of your historical costs. But bear in mind that the tariff rate or this credit value will change from year to year. And that's again because it's based on both the standard offer and the delivery rate. And those are put out to bid by the PUC every year. So you will see fluctuations in the value of that rate based on what the market for electricity is doing from year to year. One thing I want to point out is in the proposal, the original proposal that you received from Revision Energy, if you look closely at their energy rate projection calculations, what they've done is they've shown you the year one credit value as being right around 13 cents, which is set by the PUC already for 2020. And then they are projecting an annual credit value increase of 2.5%. They didn't take that number, they didn't pull that number out of thin air. It's based on projections of costs of electricity nationwide by people much smarter than I am in the Department of Defense and other Department of Energy, I believe. And I can't tell you how they come up with that number, but that is based in some analysis. However, it's a projection. It is also built. It also builds in assumptions. So that is why you don't see me trying to calculate your savings beyond year one. Excuse me. Because I have no idea what the energy market will do next year, never mind 20 years from now. excuse me for a moment. The third part of the analysis is the cost to actually purchase the solar electricity from Revision Energy and actually from their investor. And you will see that cost shown in green. Now, the cost that has been proposed is 9 cents per kilowatt hour for, if you look at the column that's called without RECs, and I'll talk about the other column shortly. At 9 cents per kilowatt hour, your cost would be roughly $204,000 a year. And again, if the simple savings is basically to look at that number and subtract it from the value of the credits that you are receiving. And that should provide you with an estimate of your savings for year one, which is in this case is $85,500 based on these numbers. Now you have an option under the contract to purchase what are called renewable energy credits or RECs. These are not the same thing as the credits, the net energy billing credits that make this proposal financially attractive. Renewable energy credits are essentially elements that are tradable commodities, and they represent proof that electricity was generated from a renewable energy resource that was then fed into the grid. And they can be sold and traded on the open market. And so owners of the RECs use them to basically do three things. They either buy RECs to, if you're a business, that you can buy RECs to comply with regulatory requirements to become green. You can either publicly claim that you've gone carbon neutral and retire the RECs, or you can resell the RECs on the open market. The market is complex. There are transaction costs involved in trading, and I generally recommend that school districts and school administrative units stay away from that, from the prospect of trading your RECs. But as the owner of the RECs, you do have that option. So basically, if you were to purchase the RECs, you could retire them and claim that you have gone green, or you can hold on to them and resell them at a future time, perhaps for higher or a lower value. We don't know what the markets will do down the road. So the second column in the green portion of that exhibit shows you what the cost is with the RECs if you were to purchase the energy, as well as the RECs. You're looking at a 5 cent per kilowatt hour hike. That would essentially translate to a reduction in savings for you by about $11,000 a year to roughly $74,000. Now, the one caveat that I have here is that these numbers are not finalized. We're still looking a little more carefully at the RSU's historical usage and costs. There are some gaps in the data that we're looking to fill. Dennis has provided that information to me as well as to Revision's analyst, but the data hasn't been crunched yet. So the kilowatt hour historical usage and the cost number that you see in the blue might change slightly. It's not going to be significant. And when we get those numbers, I would ask you for permission to update the exhibits, this exhibit with the accurate number, should you decide to move forward with this project. And basically that will give you a complete record for, for down the road, should somebody ask 10, 15, 20 years from now, who thought this up and what were they thinking? They'll have it here as part of the vote. So that's basically, I've just walked you through the calculation, and in doing that, I've talked to you about the variables, and all of those variables are basically built-in assumptions. And so if you think about, the difficulty of predicting what your electricity needs will be in the future, the difficulty of predicting electricity markets in the future, and the fact that we don't know how those electricity markets will work to change the costs of your electricity as well as the credit value, then you can start seeing how over time this kind of contract becomes more and more speculative. We know, and we can be fairly certain that you will see savings in the years after the solar farm is built up. But it's very hard for me to give you any assurances that, a decade down the road or 15 years down the road, you will see an equal number of savings. The nice thing about this arrangement is that the value of your credit is really pegged to the cost that you pay for electricity. So the cost would have to plummet pretty significantly, both in terms of transmission and delivery and in supply, for you to not see a savings. But that is, a possibility, even if it's not likely. So with that, I also provided you a summary of the key terms that are in the power purchase agreement. Unless you have questions, I was not planning on going over this document with you. And you also have the actual agreement there with you, which is, I believe, 23 pages of fine legal print. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the legislation, the mechanics of this deal, the terms, whatever you need to become comfortable with understanding these risks and become comfortable with taking your vote, excuse me.
Kate.
Thank you so much for that summary. It's very helpful. And I just have one question that was sticking out to me when I was looking through it. Does this, in a way, discourage future energy efficiency and reducing your electricity usage?
The short answer is no. If you reduce your electricity usage, you will pay less for your CMP bill. So that's a given. You'd have to reduce your electricity usage pretty dramatically before you start incurring costs that you would not otherwise see. Certainly, because of that 75% purchase or the 25% buffer, you'd have to reduce your usage by that amount at minimum. And should something dramatic happen and you do reduce your usage significantly, there are provisions under the contract where you could come back to the table and try to find somebody else, another buyer, to step into your shoes for a percentage of your purchase. If the markets are good, that won't be a problem. These are sort of clear savings that another school district or town would see and would be probably very interested in purchasing. If the electricity market does something unforeseeable, if, for example, if I always use a cold fusion example, like if we all go to cold fusion and our entire system of electricity just goes away, you will lose out on this deal. This presumes that we have an electrical system that is based on our current grid infrastructure. So my thinking is that even if we were to do that, the likelihood of that happening in the short term is pretty slim. It takes some effort and time to change a grid system like this. And while that is going on, you will see savings until such a date where a new system would be in place.
Maddie.
Hopefully these are just quick questions. On the summary of key terms page, on the back page, it says, under what circumstances could the contract be terminated? And the first example is if the construction is delayed beyond the end of this year. I'm just wondering if you've looked into what's happening currently with workers, what's the likelihood of that?
It's pretty much slim to none. The equipment for this farm has already been built and has already been purchased and is on site. Revision is waiting for its permit from CMP to proceed. They need to get what is called an interconnection permit before they can actually build the farm and connect it to the grid. So we're waiting for that piece to happen. But otherwise, the investment has occurred already in terms of purchasing the material, the solar arrays, and they're actually sitting out there waiting. Revision has told me that they're still working despite the pandemic conditions. They're in some ways their workforce is by default isolated, and these facilities are being built in remote areas. So there's not a lot of human contact, and they're able to maintain, the social distancing requirements that are in place right now.
Thank you. And my second question is on the front page, the bottom section talks about if we were to purchase the RECs and we wanted to, any press releases we might want to write where we claim that we are carbon neutral would need to be approved by the solar group.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering, what's historically, does that happen a lot? I mean, I would think we might want to approve that. How often do those press releases not get approved, or is that a mutually beneficial kind of a thing? I would just hate to go into that wanting to make this nice claim and then get stuck.
I haven't looked into the fair trade rules specifically about this, but the general idea is that if you misrepresent your a renewable energy purchase as going green and you haven't purchased the RECs, you're actually in violation of federal law, and that can have an effect on the project's qualifications, I believe, for the investment tax credit that the investors are relying on to make a profit on these projects. So the bottom line is I don't foresee that it'll be a problem. It's not a matter of prohibiting a press release. It's a matter of making sure that the language is consistent with your purchase. And so it's good practice to have the project developers involved in that.
Great, thank you for that.
Sure.
Beth.
Hi, I just had a couple of questions around with the variables of the cost of the power and then the variable credit value. Is there a situation beyond just your cold fusion example where we would be not saving, but instead paying? So like, is this, even with the variable, is it always a savings, even though it may be smaller some years and larger others?
No, I mean, you would have to see so the cost to purchase with the RECs is 9.5 cents per kilowatt hour. And the credit right now is just under 13 cents. So, if you subtract the two, there's a spread of 3.5 cents. And if the cost of your electricity supply and delivery goes below that, then you're paying more for the contract than for your credit value, and you start to see some. You're starting to not see the savings that are predicted here. My understanding, and again, I'm not an energy expert here, but my understanding is that last year or this past year was the first time that the standard offer for electricity supply went down in many years. I'm not sure what the what the oil situation nationally is going to do to the cost of our supply. I know that Maine's CMP's blend of electricity supply is largely based on natural gas prices. So the portfolio is largely made up of natural gas. But I couldn't begin to tell you what like the oil situation might do to the cost of supply. My understanding, however, is that the experts in this arena don't expect the transmission and delivery costs to go down. So, Maine's grid in particular has capacity issues, and anytime CMP builds additional transmission corridors, that cost is passed on to the customers. And so the projections are that those costs will continue to increase every year. And the 2.5% that revision uses is based on sort of these national projections of what the electricity costs will do. But if those are not accurate, you are taking a risk that you will see fewer savings, or you will see potentially no savings.
Thank you. Vali.
Thank you so much. That was super helpful. I do have a number of questions. Some of them are pretty easy, quick. The first question is the original proposal that was given to us by Revision Energy had the escalator starting on year 2, but in the current contract, they're starting in year 3. Is the seller okay with that? I mean, I have no qualms with it. It benefits us, but I want to make sure that if we sign this, we're not going to have a seller come back to us and say, "Oh, that was a mistake. Sign this other contract."
No, it's year 3. Yeah, that was that's a typo in their proposal. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Next question is for the buyout scenario. How far in advance can the seller and the purchaser establish a ballpark figure for the cost of a buyout on any given year? Say if as a school district, we wanted to establish a reserve account and start contributing to it over the years to have that amount when we wish to buy it out, wish to buy the array out. In your experience, how early can that price be set?
So the buyout here is, hold on, let me just pull up the contract so I can point you to the right place. Bear with me for one moment. Bear in mind that you are not buying 100% of the electricity of this farm. So when you crunch the numbers, and if you looked at the contract itself, you will see that the percentage that you're buying is actually fairly small. You're proposing to buy essentially 32% of the output of this farm. And the other buyers in this particular project include MS80 28, the Camden 5-town CSD. So those are the Camden school districts, as well as RSU 73. And there may be 1 or 2 other small purchasers. You'd all have to agree to buy before the purchase could happen. So my sense is that the likelihood that you would want to own the system is complicated by that factor alone. But it also, you also have to think about whether as a school department you have the legal authority to purchase a solar farm that is basically not on your school property. It's remote sited. This one is going to be in Livermore Falls, I believe. So while there's an option to purchase here, I think the likelihood that you are able to and will want to exercise that option is pretty slim. You would essentially have to buy, buy the system in with all of the other parties that are purchasing electricity from this system. And that in and of itself is a barrier, I think. But to answer your question, if you were to be able to overcome that hurdle and the legal question of whether a school department should be owning a solar farm, then the value is set at the time of the purchase, because it's pegged to the fair market value of the system. And it's also pegged to the kind of the investment value of the system to the investor, whichever is greater. So I didn't spend a lot of time trying to renegotiate this option to purchase for our clients, because I concluded fairly early that the likelihood of you needing or wanting to purchase the system is pretty slim. And there's some real legal question about whether you could do it.
Oh, duly noted. Thank you. I was under the impression it was easier, but I'm glad to know I need to stop thinking about that one. And the last
I think
question,
if you were looking to buy a system, so for example, build a solar array on your high school or on school property, that would be a very different situation. But here we're talking about a remote sited system that's completely disconnected from your buildings. And I think the real legal question is, would there be an educational purpose in making that purchase? And, you could argue it.
no, I don't need to argue anymore. No, thank you.
Sure.
So the last question is, I noticed that the contract is written all around purchasing RECs and electric energy, but we're only using the RECs. So why is there so much attention in the contract given to purchasing electric energy? Why do we need to own the energy before we resell it and get the RECs? Why can't we just get the RECs directly?
So this is a common area of confusion because the terms are so similar. You are talking about two different purchases. One is the purchase of the energy so that you can take advantage of the net energy billing credits. That's one set of credits. And you have to have a financial interest in the solar facility in order to, under the law, in order to take advantage of these net energy billing credits. That's why you're buying the energy. Separately, you have the option to buy the renewable energy credits, which are these environmental credits that allow you to claim that you have gone green. And so those are two separate purchases.
I meant the credits.
Yeah.
I used the wrong term. I actually meant, why do we need to purchase the electricity and not just the credits?
It's because the legislation requires you to have a financial interest in the farm. Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's pretty standard across the country for these kinds of arrangements for power purchase agreements.
Jeremy. I swear he had his hand up. And if anyone knows how the tech works, it's Jeremy. So. Is he on his screen? Jeremy. I see him. Jeremy. Okay, we'll come back to Jeremy. Kate has her hand up again.
I just wanted to go back to an earlier part of the discussion where folks were asking about the energy market. And the one thing that I could see that might impact the amount of savings for this project would be the Clean Energy Connect project, which is supposed to be driving down energy costs if that goes into service. So that's just one thought. I don't imagine it would ever go down to the amount that the 9 kilowatts or 9.5 kilowatts that you're getting in credits, but just a thought.
Thank you. Is Jeremy back? Do we know?
I'm back. Yep.
Oh,
Had to switch to phone. Just had a question on the site itself in Livermore Falls. It looks like it's an existing, literally a farm of some sort. Will any of that still be like hayed or anything, the site itself, or will it just be for the arrays? And curious about the site itself going forward.
I don't know the answer to that question. I vaguely recall that revisions analyst Kurt Penny mentioned in another school board meeting that the farmer who is involved in this deal is leasing the land to Revision to build this array, is basically doing it so that they can continue operating the farm. But don't hold me to that. I don't know exactly how that arrangement is structured, but I can certainly follow up if that's important for you to know, and get an answer to you on that.
We could probably find it from Revision directly.
Yeah, yeah, they could certainly tell you.
Great, thank you.
I had two quick questions. One was kind of more general on how these arrays work. It looks like we lose capacity at, a little bit per year to about 85% of the max when we start. Is that typical?
Yeah, there's a projected degradation of the solar panels,
Like
and
immediately?
the
I mean, it's year to year.
photovoltaic capacity year to year. So that's built into the modeling. Yeah.
So by the end, we're actually purchasing a good portion less than the 75% of where we are now.
That's right. Yeah.
So
And you are paying for the specific output, the production of the facility, not, and you have an estimate in Exhibit 1 of the contract for how many kilowatt hours you would be purchasing.
So that's a good question. So are we purchasing 33.95% of whatever it creates, or are we purchasing
Yes.
2,272,000?
You are purchasing 33 and change percent of whatever it is the solar farm is generating. And the kilowatt hour number is a not to exceed number. So you have a cap on the amount that you would purchase.
So that's a cap. Okay.
Yeah.
So my other question was you had mentioned the site has been secured by Revision and that they're in the queue for the interconnection site.
Yes.
My understanding is with all of the solar development that's happened since those green laws came into play, that some of these interconnection sites have applications 4 and 5 times the capacity of the interconnection site. So
Yeah.
just because they're in that queue does not necessarily mean that, depending on the interconnection site, that they would actually be the winning project.
Yes.
What do we think the likelihood? Obviously, if they don't win it, we don't move forward with the contract. But just for our purposes of planning, what do we think the chances of success for them being the winning bid for this are?
They're first in the queue for this particular portion of the grid. So I think the chance is very high that they will be able to interconnect, barring any technical issue that I can't really speak to. But you are correct. If they don't interconnect, then you don't go forward. You have no obligation here. But of all the projects that I've been working on, this one gives me, except for one that's already built and generating electricity, which is not a solar farm. This one gives me the highest degree of confidence that it will actually be built on time and generating credits.
Susanna.
Yeah, I just have a question, and you may have answered this enough a moment ago, but talking about the percentage of the electricity that is able to be generated by solar as a legal number that's generated based on our usage, and looking at the degradation of the solar panels over a period of time, And looking at the percentage that we would own effectively of the farm, but also having the kilowatt hour cap. If we use less electricity, if we're under that kilowatt hour cap, is that number able to be somewhat flexible as the degradation of the panel develops? Are we able to, if there's energy left that we're not getting, are we able to get on that so that we're keeping that 75% or as close to that as we can?
So what I hear you're asking is that if your electricity need continues to be what it is currently in the future, and in light of the degradation, if the solar farm is actually generating more electricity than was estimated, could you take advantage of that?
Yeah.
And the answer is probably yes. The way you would do that is to reapproach the investor to increase your percentage. And if there's room in the system to do that, I'm sure they would be happy to sell you more. But it would take a separate negotiation. And I think that I think my understanding is that they're trying to fit another buyer into this system, because they actually have, what the ideal situation is to make sure that all of the buyers involved in this transaction, their purchases equal 100% of the projected solar output of this farm. And that projection, by the way, is based on some very sophisticated modeling. So I don't expect it to be dramatically different than the numbers that you see. So you may be asked actually to purchase a little less than what you are pegged at right now in order to fit in that fifth or sixth buyer and fill up the bucket to 100%. The way the vote is drafted basically says that you are authorizing the superintendent to enter into a contract that does not exceed 75% of your historical usage. If you wanted to up that number to 80% or more, that's a total business judgment on your on your side. I've had schools purchase anywhere from 65 to 100% of their projected electricity usage, depending on their various unique circumstances. So 75% is kind of a little more conservative than I've seen some of the other school districts do. But I think ultimately the amount you purchase will be driven more by the system capacity and the need for the investor to make sure that 100% is purchased. But if you wanted to maximize your credits, then bumping that number up now would probably be the way to do it, as opposed to trying to fit it in the future should there be additional unmet usage.
On a follow-up to that, I was under the impression from the meeting with Revision Energy, with the sustainability group, that we were limited by the percentage of electricity that we could have through the solar panel. And I was in my head, it was somewhere around 80%, and we couldn't go above that.
Revision typically recommends that you have a buffer anywhere from 10 to 20%.
Okay.
So that's their sort of business practice. But I don't think there's no legal limitation. It's really what is negotiable. And it may be that given that other purchasers have already signed on to this project, there's not enough room to up that number anyway. But we could check that with Revision. And if you're interested in buying more than 75%, make sure to build that into your vote, and we can check and see if that's feasible.
Thank you.
I'm interested to hear where I guess I assumed that was the recommendation from Revision, but you're telling me that what I'm hearing is that usually they're saying 80 to 90%, and we chose 75. I'm interested to hear from, I don't know if the superintendent or someone from the sustainability committee or Dennis has a thought on how we landed on 75%.
So I would ask Dennis to answer that question.
So that was a recommendation from revision. Apparently, if you get too close to, if you go over the certain amount of percentage, you actually end up losing money on credits, I guess, from what I understand. So that was a recommendation from revision. They like to have that buffer in there. I don't know why they recommended 75% at this time, but I know that that was a good, comfortable number for them.
Okay, interesting.
I can check in with revision and find that out as well, if why the 75% was recommended. I suspect that the reason for that is because they already have a number of buyers who have signed on to this specific project. And so that may be all that's left in the contract or in, as far as output is in this facility. Keep in mind that if you find that this project is going really well and you're saving a lot of money and the future looks bright, there's nothing to prevent you from entering into a second power purchase agreement with a developer of any renewable facility within CMP's territory for the remaining 25% or any portion of that remaining buffer. So you're not tied. You don't tie your hands here by purchasing 75% of your usage. You can always find another project to fill in the gap in the future, if presuming that things are going well and solar projects are still being developed.
Thank you. Kate.
No, that's, I think, good advice to maybe not go in as high as we would want until we know how it works out, especially because we've got the energy audit coming up. And I just would be nervous to overshoot the target and then not, disincentivize ourselves from doing any of the recommendations coming out of the energy audit. So certainly once that's completed, we could, and we have started to see the savings from this agreement. I like the idea of being able to revisit maybe a different agreement and increasing the purchase later. I think that's smart.
Valley.
I'm looking through my notes here, and the first financial summary, the revision proposed was for a proposed generation of 2,001,750 kilowatt hours, which is equivalent to 85% of our consumption, based on the original numbers that we shared. I'm not sure if the numbers that AGA has been working with have been revised and that they're more accurate, and that's where we have a lower percentage. But I'm comfortable going down to 75, but I wanted to point out that the original proposal was for 85, based on whichever numbers they received.
Okay. I do not see any other questions. I guess I have a very long motion here somewhere. Here we go. All right, here's the real question, Aga. Do I have to read this?
No. The only thing that you would need to do if you're comfortable with, purchasing up to 75% and you want to purchase the energy plus the RECs, the combined energy and REC rate at 9.5 cents per kilowatt hour. The only thing that you would need is a motion to read the motion at the very top.
Oh, that's much shorter and reasonable.
Much shorter, which is why we put those at the top.
I appreciate that. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments they want to share before we, Susanna's hand popped up.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, do we want AGA to look into numbers that are different than 75%? Or is that the number that we want to settle on? Noting what Valley was saying a moment ago about the original idea being higher, but using different numbers that might not be as relevant.
Just wondering.
Jen Galetta.
I just wanted to say, when I looked up the company, that there was an article in the Penn Bay Pilot about another school system that was doing this, and it talked about, this is to answer Jeremy's questions, it talked about that the farmer was selling, doing this to save his farm for his family after he was gone, and apparently most of the farm will be untouched. So this is an for him to try to save the farmland for his family after he's gone. So if that helps anybody.
Thank you, Jen. Maddie.
Just to respond to Susanna's question, I like what Kate suggested, although I would be interested in looking at a higher percentage. I think it does make sense for us to wait until post-audit, see what the economy looks like, see what energy costs look like in the future, and the idea of buying our needs at a different facility in the future sounds like a safer option. So I'd propose we stick with 75 or less for now.
Thank you. Valerie.
Yeah, I would like to echo that in light of the fact that we're doing a full district energy audit, and hopefully we'll capture some savings so we'll be consuming less energy. I mean, it may be that we consume more electricity because that's more efficient and that's what the audit recommends. But overall, I would hope that we would consume less tomorrow. So 75 is fine with me.
Yeah, I think I agree, because I think if what we find is that we'd like to lock down some more with the volume of projects that are sort of in the works at the early stages and later stages so far. And given, we would only be looking for a smaller percentage of our total, I don't think we would have a hard time finding, a developer who's got a little bit, to Aga's point of, these projects that want to get to 100%. We could likely find a project that has a small sliver that they're trying to sell out. And since we don't need a big chunk, because most of ours is already locked down, we probably wouldn't have a ton of trouble finding a project that we could fit a small piece into. Valerie.
Yeah, I also wanted to remind everyone that the Sustainability Committee did look at a hybrid system of this off solar and then having something installed on our roof in one of our buildings. So if we feel like we can use more credits later on, or we're using more electricity than we get credits for, we could always just put our own panels on one of the roofs in one of the schools. Yeah, which would be really nice in terms of educational purposes. Students could actually see everything there. I know that we're invited to bring kids on field trips to this solar farm, but it will be more likely that they will look up at the ceiling and see what's up there than they will actually all board the bus and go and do the field trip. Yeah, so that's always an option that's available to us, and teachers are going to take it around.
Maybe we can tag team it with the farm and then the solar farm, and they can do both on the same field trip. Mara.
So I see that the commercial operation date, the anticipated date is December 31st of this year. So is that so next year is when we would be actually using the electricity, or you know what I mean, under this agreement, when we would benefit from it?
Yeah, you'll start seeing credits on your bill around the end of this year, actually. So probably Camden Solar, which is the investor, they expect to notify you that the farm is built and interconnected by December of 2020. So as soon as they interconnect, within a month or so of that, if CMP has all of its ducks in a row, you should be seeing the credits. Okay. And so actually this project is looking like it's going to be probably the first, if not one of the first solar projects to be up and running under this new law in Maine.
Wow. And just to follow up on that, if I don't even want to think about a scenario where this would happen, but if we were not consuming this much electricity, we would be paying for the electricity anyway, basically. Like if our schools were not open, is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that is the risk, the speculative nature of this. You're buying the electricity and making the projection that you will, benefit from those purchase savings. But if you, if you have extended school closures due to the pandemic or other reasons, or if you need to close buildings permanently, that's when you start looking at your options for either terminating the contract or finding another entity to step into your shoes. And that is an important piece here, because the financing of this project is basically twofold. One is from the investor, which is a investment firm called Aligned Climate Capital, and they're national. They're involved in all kinds of projects all over the country. But the other entity that's involved is Rural Development, so the USDA. And because of their involvement, the cost of the project has gone down a little bit for the buyers. But as a result, the contract is what we call firm, which means it's very difficult to get out. It means that you're committing to essentially a 25-year term. And unless net metering goes away and you're no longer seeing the benefit of the bargain here, you really are committing to purchasing this percentage of output for the life of the contract, which again is here for our purposes. You should think of that as a 25-year contract.
Thank you.
Okay. So without any further hands up, I would take a motion I move that the vote entitled Vote to Authorize Solar Power Purchase Agreement be adopted in the form presented to this meeting. Thank you, Susanna. Second from Vali. Any other questions? All right, we will do the roll vote. Kate.
Yes.
Jeremy.
Yes.
Candy.
Yes.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Susanna.
Yes.
Beth.
Yes.
Mara.
Yes.
I vote yes. Vali.
Yes.
Maddie.
Yes.
And I heard word that Rhea will not be joining us this evening. She had AP exams today, so she gets the night off. Okay, so that passes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Aga, for that presentation. It was very helpful. This is clearly a complex contract, and I think you made it very understandable for us novice solar people.
I'm glad to hear it. It was my pleasure. Unless you need me, I will log off now.
No, thank you very much for joining us.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Okay. So administrator reports 9B. Oh no, we did that. A was the presentation, B was the vote. So we are all set on both of those. So C, this was the one that Dr. Foley added at the beginning of the meeting, an update on graduation.
And so we will turn that over to Principal Galko.
Hi again. I think hopefully this is good news that I have to share, that we have a concrete plan for our graduation for 2020 that I'd like to share with the board, and hopefully have the board's support to move forward with this plan. So Charlie Mellon and I have been working closely with the senior class officers and the senior class advisors to really review all of our options. We've heard lots of ideas and feedback. We've appreciated them all from parents and community members. And really, we weighed most heavily on what the students themselves wanted to do, as this is their celebration and their graduation. And there's still some ideas that we're planning for senior week. We were We're hoping for some of them to be a surprise. I will say that there's been lots of concern about the yard signs. That's something we already have in the works, and we were planning it as a surprise, which we don't think is possible anymore. So we will just share with everybody. We're not going to share exactly the plans for them, but I know some parents were starting to buy their own signs, which I don't want people to do because we already have them in process. So that cat's out of the bag, but we have some other surprises that we're hoping for. So really what we heard loud and clear was that they were adamant that they wanted this celebration to be together as a whole group. We know I meet every week with the Cumberland principals of area high schools, and I know that many schools have moved forward with plans to have mini graduation ceremonies where the class is split into small groups. Some of those, just due to the size, are not going to have parents or family members in attendance or staff. And that was something that was really important to our students, not only to have their classmates be together, but to have their families there and the staff as well. And so we did consider those smaller ceremonies, but decided that was not the route that we wanted to follow. So with the board's support, what we would like to do is to hold our graduation at the Saco Drive-In Movie Theater. And we would be able to secure the date of June 8th, which is only one day after our original graduation date, which I think is much better than having our students wait until July or August when some of them will have to have already left for college or for military or for work. And so the details of this, some of the details for this plan are guided by CDC and state guidelines. And some of the stipulations that the drive-in movie theater is making are not things that are negotiable. They're things that we have to follow so that they're able to open. So things such as the cars have to be spaced out, but every graduate would be able to have one car packed with as many family and friends as they can. Staff would be able to attend, which is wonderful. And then everything would be pre-recorded professionally and then played on the screen of the movie theater. One thing that is tough for people who are not night owls is that the ceremony would start at 8:50 p.m. You have to do it that late. The kids are obviously fine with that. I'm a night owl, so I'm okay. Charlie Mellon might fall asleep. But no, he won't, I promise. But so with this pre-recorded, our plan is to hire a professional company to make the video, and we would be able to include a lot of the pieces of our traditional ceremony. So having a keynote speaker, student performances. One very special part to us is the sharing of roses with family members. We have a creative way of doing that. And then weather permit, we would be able to do this in the rain if we have good weather, which we know that we will. The drive-in movie theater is allowing us to have one chair put in directly in front of the car. And then we'll have all the graduates in their caps and gowns sit in that chair just while we do the conferring of the diplomas. And so every graduate will have their picture that's up on the screen. So, I think that one challenging part is they are not able to walk across any form of stage and get their diploma when their name is called. But we will figure out a way to get them their diplomas that evening. And hopefully I think that there will be lots of celebrating that's there. People do have to stay in their cars. And I still have to get exact information about a mask because I don't think the kids would be super happy about wearing a mask, but that might be part of it if they choose to get out of their cars. And they can sit in the bed of a truck, which we know in Maine, there's lots of families that have a truck. So they'd be able to celebrate that way. The kids also, the students who are helping to plan had the idea of everybody decorating their cars. So I think that we can make this a very festive event. I know that some people are going to be disappointed that it's not a more traditional ceremony, but again, I think it was incredibly important to the students that they were together as one group. And this is a way that we think that we can do that. We are still, like I said, planning some things for senior week and for their actual graduation date of June 7th. but I'm going to try to keep some of that a surprise as we move forward. So if there's questions that I can answer, and we're looking for the support of the board to be able to announce this to families and students.
Thank you, Jen. That's very exciting. Kate.
I'm really excited about this idea. I think Jen knows that I'm really excited about this idea because I had read about it and emailed her, and she said that the kids were kind of, yeah. But I was thinking it'd be fantastic because you can get most all of them and their families together. So I'm fully in support of this idea.
Thank you. And for those of us who know and love teenagers, at first they were like, absolutely not. And then when the governor came out with her plan, they were like, this sounds like a wonderful idea. We're going to do it.
See, we're building resilient learners, right? They can adapt. And Susanna.
Yeah, I also really like this idea, and I think that's a really fun and creative solution and way to go forward. Just one question, taking place at night in cars and teenagers, and whether there are issues with parents, maybe kids that aren't there with their parents, or supervision, alcohol afterward, and people driving home in cars, and just what the provisions are. You can hide a lot of things in cars. I don't know, it's just something to question, but otherwise I'm really happy with this.
I think that, no, it's a great question. I mean, it's obvious that my biggest concern, I'm actually more worried about them hugging and being able to control them staying in their cars. We will be required to have police officers there. I think the police have to come from the town of Saco. I've been talking with the Biddeford. Biddeford High School is also doing this plan. And so we've been talking about the police presence there. I think the drive-in is going to be really serious about them staying in their cars. But it is really rare. It's not that it doesn't happen, but it's very rare that we have a student come to graduation with no family members at all. And so since they're only allowed one car and they have to come with their family and they have to stay in their car, I'm hopeful that families are going to make the best decisions for what happens. We are talking, I've already connected with a couple of people about students who don't have transportation to Saco. So we'll figure that out for them. And then it is a concern. We always have project graduation, and that is something that we cannot organize because we can't organize something of that size. And I think we'll just, really try to message to families about that concern and families making the right decision about how students spend that evening after graduation. And it's a Monday. Maybe that will deter some things.
And they won't be done until like 10:30 at night.
Yes, or later.
Jen Galetta.
I can't say much because I'm very emotional about this, but thank you so much.
You're welcome. We're very happy to have a plan.
Vali.
I probably should be crying, but I'm just happy. So thank you so much. Maximo was here and he said, "Oh, that's great. So you have 2 votes from here."
My email for students is ready to go because of the parent factor on the board. So
well, hurry up because he may be already out.
Maddie.
I love the plan. I think it's amazing, really creative and really fun. Just tell everybody to go watch Grease and then they'll be like, oh, dragons are cool. Although that's a weird scene. But anyway, I am wondering about financially the class dues that go toward project graduation that are typically paid in and how that's going to be handled.
So, part of graduation is covered through our high school budget. So renting of the Merrill Auditorium, things like that those costs will help cover some of the cost. I'm working with the class officers about what we're using the fundraised money for. And then I think once we get through all of these, like things like the signs are fairly expensive. And so they have made the decision to use class money to do that. And so after we're going to be responsible with the spending. We're not going to come anywhere close to what project graduation costs, because that's an exorbitant cost. And then we'll decide what we're going to do with families. And so that money stays no matter what. If we had only a small portion of that money left, the money stays in a fund for that class for 5 years. And so they have even talked about doing a class event all together in December of 2020. That might be something that they'll do for as many people who can come home for the holidays. And so we have some decisions to make about how or if we would reimburse families who have paid those dues. We have quite a few families who have not paid those dues. And so we're looking into that, but it's tough to say because this is the first time that we can't predict exactly what we'll spend. But we'll certainly guarantee that to families that we'll be responsible about the spending, and then we'll decide what we do in terms of the money that's been paid to families, by families, excuse me.
Thanks.
Jeremy.
Just more of a, and I think it's a fantastic idea. I definitely agree with all. It sounds great. Just want to make sure there's considerations for divorced families, if there's any protection from abuse orders or those type things for the 1 car limit. Just make sure that's part of the plan. But I think it's a wonderful, wonderful idea to tribute to honor these kids.
It's a great question. I talked about that with one of the senior class advisors today, that we absolutely know that there's family situations where they will not ride in 1 car or cannot ride in 1 car. And I think we'll have a little bit of wiggle room. We don't have enough spaces. There's only a total of 250 spaces, and we have 130 graduates plus our staff and hopefully some members of the board and things like that who want to come. And so we're not able to say that everybody can have 2 cars, but we definitely can support some of those more challenging situations and until we get to the 250 maximum.
Thank you.
Sorry, Lindsay.
I love it. I just love this idea. And I'm so glad you guys are going to make it happen, because this class, some of you are moms of members of this class, but they started on such a hard note. So to be able to make this happen for them, and they'll certainly never forget it. And I can even see like a Grease movie coming out about the class of 2020 having a drive-in. I mean, you got to love Maine. So good on you guys. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other comments. I guess, I mean, this isn't an official vote of the board, but I think based on the conversation and the comments we've heard, I think you have the full support of the board to hit send.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jen. That I know that, with everything else on your plate, to figure out an event like that couldn't be easy. So thank you and your team for all the work. I know it's going to mean a lot.
Thank you. I would have, if Rhea was here, I would have asked her to shout out the class officers. I should have said that at the beginning, that the senior class officers, we meet every week. They have just been outstanding. I think they've been put in a really unique situation that most class officers don't sign up for, and the class advisors. So they've done a wonderful job. Thank you.
Okay. So we don't have any board comments or committee reports, no policy review. So we are up to 12 unfinished business. So the discussion of the adopted FY21 budget.
All right, thank you. The administrative team took the task that you gave us to do very seriously at the last board meeting. And we really have looked under every rock there is for savings. And what we present to you tonight is a budget that we feel does not negatively impact the education that we are going to give our students next year. It also still creates more equity between schools in the district, and it does still respond to the growing enrollment needs that we have specifically at the high school. As a team, in a year of this kind of economic crisis, we really believe that this is not the time to greatly expand programming. Instead, it's a time to really respond to the needs and the impact that COVID-19 has had on our families, both economically and I think emotionally. I think we're all kind of feeling the impact of this. So I sent the list out to you on Monday, and I'll be going through that tonight with kind of our thinking. We started the cuts you see at the top. We feel that those are the least painful. And then we work our way down to the cuts that we deem to be, a little bit more painful. So our first recommendation is to use the additional money from the audited unexpended fund balance from FY19. And if we use an additional $389,000, this will still leave us $100,000 in the audited unexpended fund balance. I have asked our interim business manager, Scott Batonis, to work on projecting what we think the year-end savings are going to be. And he's being very conservative in his estimate, but we feel confident that we'll have at least $700,000 to add to that $100,000 from this year. So that would lead us to have for FY20 to come in around $800,000. And it may be more, but we feel pretty confident that it will be at least that. So the second recommendation is to move 3 of our positions to be grant funded. And 2 of them are going to be covered under local entitlement. And that's the social worker at the high school, and then 1 ed tech. And then the new guidance counselor at DCS would be funded through the CARES Act money that we will be receiving, that we've been talking about, that we estimate to be around $130,000. So that will easily cover that 0.5 position and still leave us with some additional money. We already fund, just for your information, 3 positions under Title I. We do that every year. So this is not something that's unusual for districts to do. And part of the reason that we feel like we can do this with the local entitlement is there were some out of district placements that once the COVID-19 hit, that we were able to realize some savings. I've worked with Bonnie Violet, the Director of Instructional Support. We feel very, very comfortable with this proposal. Then the next recommendation in adult education was one that was suggested by the Director of Adult Ed, Peter Wagner, in consultation with our business manager, Scott. And we do not believe that this will alter the services that we are going to be offering at all. I know that Peter had spoke at a previous board meeting about how long could he continue to pay the staff if we weren't providing any programming. And I think we talked about how that we were fine with making it through May, but if we had to keep paying throughout the summer, then we would be worried. Our plan right now is to run Camp Seaside based on the governor's latest recommendations, and also to even start opening up the Laugh and Learn daycare for families who need it. And we're hoping to start that on June 1st. So we feel like our revenue stream will resume and that we can easily cover this $10,000. The next recommendation is really due to a drop in enrollment in kindergarten at Moore Street. We added that in, but in the last several weeks, we've had students withdraw. And so now the anticipated class size by reducing this teacher comes in at like 18s and 19s. The target in our class size policy is 18. And with 5 teachers, we feel like that this is a really safe recommendation. And if we don't need the kindergarten teacher, then we don't need the 0.1 PE teacher. So those are kind of together. And then the next recommendation comes because we recently learned that our literacy coach at the middle school wants to return to the classroom. So we're allowing her to do that. And we decided rather than advertise for a part-time middle school literacy coach, that we would just expand the consultation services that we receive from Kelly Smith. And so this results in a savings of $15,500. Next, Principal Grogan presented an idea where he really would like to move to a model where his 6th grade world language exposes all students to both French and Spanish. And so it would be more of an exploratory type course. And then at the end of the 6th grade year, students would choose whether they want to focus on French or Spanish. And this new model would reduce the need for a world language teacher at Freeport Middle School by a half a position. And at Durham Community School, we don't offer foreign language in 6th grade. So that kind of makes a more kind of systemic alignment also. So our next recommendation is to reduce the equipment line within technology by $50,000. This was the year that we were going to expand because the state had kind of pushed the pause button on the MLTI project. So this would now have us remain pretty much status quo, which is probably what a lot of districts throughout the state are doing. If my prediction comes true and we have more than the $700,000 in savings, we would then probably pre-buy some of the computers out of this year's budget. So we believe we can absorb that $50,000 cut to technology. Equipment at Durham Community School, Will had asked for some extra PE equipment. This is beyond what the equipment line is at DCS, but he believes that this could easily be deferred for a year, or again, depending where our savings come in, we might be able to buy it this year. Also, Nick Lyons, the PE teacher at DCS, and Trevor Donahue, the PE teacher at Pownell. They've been working closely together and talking about ways where if they don't run the same unit at the exact same time, that they can share equipment. So I think that's a great collaborative effort that really we won't see an impact on students. The 2 lines that are savings that Craig found in the athletic budget, again, we don't feel like this will impact students. One is a different website that he's moving to that realizes a savings. Another is just when we were really reviewing the budget was a cut that we thought we'd already made, but when Scott went back, we really hadn't made that cut. And so that's the additional money that you see there with as part of the 4,190. And then it gets a little bit more painful, I would say, when we get to the expanded offerings. We were hoping to move to a swimming stipend so our students could have their own swimming coach, but they would still be doing swimming as they did this year. And we believe that the Yarmouth coach would continue to coach them. We have 2 clubs at Mass Landing School that are currently happening, and we were just hoping to give those staff a stipend, but we feel like we can postpone that for a year and hopefully have that in the budget for next year. And then we had 2 new enrichment opportunities for visiting authors at DCS and Pownell Elementary School, and we're happy to defer that for a year. Then the next area under expanded programming, this would maintain the programming that we currently have and would not expand it. And as I said at the beginning, we really do want to be sensitive to our communities, and we recognize that this is probably not the year to do expanded programming. And then the last area that we have on the list that you asked me to look into is how about salary savings? So I did go to the association, and as an administrative team, we discussed it also. And with the savings that we've already kind of realized that I've presented to you this evening, we feel like the rest of the savings could be made up through one furlough day that would require all staff across the district to take, and that would realize a savings of $106,000. Both of our we have two union groups. One is the ESP, the other one is the teachers, and they both agree that their contracts as written allows allows you as the board to modify the number of days worked up to 2.5 days. Administrators and other groups are happy to have their days also aligned so that it's I think a shared responsibility. And so both the association and the administrators fully endorse this recommendation. And the association, as you currently know, we are in negotiations with the ESP contract, but the teacher's contract, we would both sides would have to agree to open it up, and that is not the path they want to take. And I really, when I look at the numbers, I do not believe we have a need to do that, because we were able to reach your request of having anywhere from a 0 to 2% tax impact. And with this proposal, this gets us down to a 0% tax impact in Freeport. It puts us at a negative 1.22% impact in Durham, and a negative 0.15% impact in Pownell. I did check in, as you requested, with what the other Cumberland County superintendents are doing in this area around asking the associations, the unions, to open up their contract. There is only one district that is thinking about doing that, and I don't think that's for sure as of today when I checked. The rest of them indicated that they really have no interest in going that route. Some of them, like us, are in the middle of negotiations with some of their groups, so I'm sure that that is playing into the negotiation, but they're not going to the groups where their contracts run through the next couple of years. They're not asking them at this point to open it up. We really do believe that these are cuts that we can live with, and that we feel that, this creates a very kind of fiscally responsible budget to present to our taxpayers and to you. And we do want to have the budget adopted. So I'm hoping that these cuts will help in getting that done. Kate had also asked us to consider about, let's not just be looking at today. How about, if next year, in the middle of the year, the state comes in and says we have to do a curtailment? How about looking out, 2 years? So in your box at the bottom, you can see that we put some thought into, well, what money do we have to draw on if we have a further curtailment? Because of the way we did the funding, we could have funded more position with the CARES Act, but we decided we wanted to keep the savings because we really don't know what our plan is yet for September. And it may require more transportation. It may require more Clorox wipes. I mean, we just don't know what's in front of us. And so we want to keep some money there. And so that we have about $81,000 remaining there. Then we could always draw from that unexpended fund balance that we feel we will have $800,000 there. By then, it would be an audited amount. We still, with this proposal, would have 1.5 furlough days to draw on if we needed to have additional savings in the middle of the year. Our understanding, because of the COVID-19, is that we could use what we've been signaled from MSMA and the DOE, that we could tap into those reserve accounts. So we have 500,000 in reserve accounts. One's in the capital reserve accounts. The other one is in the fuel reserve account. And then we do also have the 196,000 that we have in the contingency accounts. And so that's where I would say if we need to find additional savings, those would be the first places that we would look. We can always go into more painful areas and like freeze supply lines. If all of a sudden in October they said, you know, we're going to withhold some additional money, we could look to do some things like that. I do want to thank my administrative team for their thoughtful thinking that led to this list of recommended cuts. We did not want to create holes that would be hard to fill in future years. And so we didn't go to lines such as supplies and equipment to begin with, because then we would just need to fill that in a future year. It does still expand programming with the addition of the guidance counselor at DCS and the half-time social worker at the high school. It also, this budget still maintains the math teacher and the ed tech that is needed at the high school because of the increase in enrollment. So this is a proposal that the administrative team fully endorses, and we hope that you can endorse it, and then that our communities can also endorse it. We have a few questions that I just want to respond to that I received. One of the questions was, over the years, how stable has the local entitlement grant funding been? That is a grant that's very stable as long as you're maintaining, it's called the maintenance of effort. So as long as we maintain our spending from the local budget or increase it by $1, that is very stable funding. I think I've kind of talked about why community programs felt like they could sustain that cut for 1 year. And if you want further information about that, we can have Peter address that. There was a question about, with this cut in the world language program, what would the class sizes be in the Spanish class? And in 7th and 8th grade, they're going to be the same as they would be normally. And then the way he has redone the schedule, it would be the same as like core subjects like language arts. So they would have, he's estimating like 20 to 21 in that exploratory class. There was a question about, are the furlough days prohibited for this year through June? And they are, because of the executive order from the governor. And there was a question about, where will the furlough day come from? And we would recommend that that would be one of our professional learning days, because we really can't mess with the student days, because that is something that is required by law and can only be waived as it is being waived this year by the Commissioner of Education. And the only other thing I want to add is we really do need a decision tonight to keep with our timeline of having the annual budget meeting on June 17th at Freeport High School. And we do plan to try to send a one-page, like down and dirty flyer to all households in the district, because of course, as you know, they have the budget brochure that has all of that previous information in it. And I think the only way, I know we do have a reporter with us tonight from the forecaster, and he will be running a story tomorrow, but not everybody reads the newspaper, but hopefully people read their mail. So we will be getting something out to all of our households. And with that, I think we'll open it up for questions and discussions, and we have all the administrators here to answer all your questions.
Thank you, Becky. I know that was not an easy task we gave you 2 weeks ago, so I appreciate the effort for you and all of your team on that. I saw Maddie's hand go up first.
Yeah, echoing your thanks very much for that work. I would just like to hear a little bit more about the world languages change at the middle school. That does give me some pause. I mean, having moved here from Texas, I've always felt that our languages in this part of the world are not as robust as they are in other parts of the world. And so I hate to see that program change. I'm hoping it's more a change than a diminishment. So I'd like to know a little bit more about that.
So I'll ask Ray to speak to that and answer your specific questions on that.
So the change it's just in 6th grade. The 7th and 8th grade will remain the same as it has been. In 6th grade, currently the students met for 27 class periods for French and for Spanish separately. And the change will see them go to only 17 class periods. The 6th grade focus was, and still will be, a focus on exploration. It's more of a world cultures with some intro to language, where the primary language, teaching and acquisition really happens in 7th and 8th grade for us. And at the end of 8th grade, like right now, and at the end of, a regular year, we start to almost track the kids a little bit that are going into Spanish 2 or French 2, so that we have them, spending April break to June to get ready to be level 2 ready. And that is something we would continue to do to make sure that we had, kind of that same percentages of kids being ready and able to go on to level 2 French and Spanish.
Thank you, Ray. Who's Kate?
Okay. Thank you very much for this. Becky has the best, most clear handouts ever, and has diagrams. So my first question is about the box on the bottom of the second page for the additional savings in case of potential curtailment. What is the legal mechanism for accessing audited fund balance at mid-year? Because I thought you had to vote on it for the following budget process, that the taxpayers had to vote on it.
Scott, can you answer that?
I think so. So you don't really vote on your revenues. The voters vote to to expend monies, and they vote to accept state aid, and they don't vote to accept state aid. They vote to assess the towns, the local additional and the local. So if you have a curtailment of revenues and you have money in the bank, you're allowed to dip into that. If you go back, it was probably about 7 or 8 years ago when they changed the warrant structure. Prior to that, you voted for every revenue. Your miscellaneous, whatever it was part of one of the articles. Now it no longer is.
Oh, maybe that's what I'm remembering then. Not that there was a vote in the warrants to move fund balance.
No, because this is, if you recall, this is where the issue came up last year, right? So we approved the expenditures in warrants 1 through 12, and then we didn't assess as much as we thought we had in the warrant for how much we were going to charge the towns. So whatever the difference between what we get from the state and what we assess the towns, that's what comes out of fund balance. That's why we had to use our fund balance last year to pay that $361,000 that we inadvertently didn't raise.
And that's the same for the reserve accounts. You can access those without a authorization from the voters.
The the governor has made a part of her proclamation in this is that the reserve accounts, if you have a reserve account that's been made, it can be redirected for other expenses. Like typically, if you had a fuel reserve, it could only be used for fuel.
Right.
But this next year, you could take that fuel reserve account and use it some other way. When your reserve account is built, that's when the voters are paying for it.
Yeah.
So they've authorized the money to be spent in essence, usually giving the school board the final say of going into the account.
Yeah, and when I just was wondering because when they vote on it, we say we're going to place it in a fuel reserve account.
Correct.
I mean, maybe legally the governor's allowing us to do that, but that's just something to be cognizant of that before, that might be an option to do is to go into the reserve accounts when they've been designated by the voters for specific purpose.
Yes, we would want to communicate widely if we were going to use it for something other than its intended purpose.
Yeah. Okay. And my last question should be really easy to answer. The Moore Street School kindergarten teacher reduction does that normally also have an ed tech? Is there not an accompanied reduction in ed tech hours for one less kindergarten class?
No, we didn't ask for expanded ed tech services when we put that in there. It's the pre-K where you're required by law to have the additional ed tech for the student teacher ratio.
Valley.
Thank you so much for doing this exercise. This is super helpful and yes, very clear. Couple of questions. The kindergarten teacher, the class size has been reduced now. Could Julie tell us a little bit about what happened with enrollment there? And while she's at it, mention the update that you had for us to discuss about hiring a second grade teacher. Would that be for this year, or is there an enrollment change so you wanted to add a second grade teacher to next year's budget?
I am blanking out on this.
I think she's just replaced an existing second grade teacher that we know is leaving.
Okay.
Oh, yes,
so
yes, yeah.
that
Oh,
second
you mean
teacher-
tonight? Oh, yes, yes, yes. That was, okay, thank you. That's due to a retirement. But,
Okay.
but Julie, would you talk about what's happening with enrollment at Moore Street?
And Julie got bumped off, so I don't think she's back on. She texted me, but I can answer the question. I just sent her the phone number. I think she's going to try to call in. She lost internet at her house. The numbers, the most recent update I had from Julie on those K numbers, originally they had 99 students enrolled at the peak, and I think they're at 93 right now.
So can we predict with confidence that we will remain at those numbers? Because what happens if it's still pretty early spring? We have the latter part of the spring and then this summer, and we have families lose income who may have kids in private schools, or what's the threshold there? We may see an influx of students from private school to public school, and I just don't want to cut it so close that next year we may be having buyer's remorse about having cut this position.
Good timing because she's back. Hi, Julie.
Hi. Sorry, I lost internet for a bit.
So Valley was just asking the question about how confident are we about class sizes. And I think that they're always fluctuating. And we just, as you know, we make the best recommendations that we can based upon the information in front of us. And that is one of the reasons that the board has the contingency, I think, line in case all of a sudden, if we got 10 kids who enrolled and our class sizes go up, then, we need to adjust to that. But one of the reasons we feel very comfortable making this is that Durham's numbers are also fluctuating over there. And it could be that, that if Julie's goes up, that we have a teacher there that we could transfer. It could be even if his numbers remain where they are, there could be another additional cut. So we're pretty comfortable with this one because of that. But, as you know, and as Jeremy pointed out, if all of a sudden nobody's going to private school, that's going to impact our numbers. But we don't know where they're going to impact the numbers. So it could be that we don't need a kindergarten teacher, but we need a grade 4. So I would not want to keep the kindergarten teacher in there, because hiring a kindergarten teacher is very different than hiring like a 5th or a 6th grade teacher. So we have to watch the numbers and then use the contingency. But Julie, do you want to add something about just what you're seeing with the enrollment?
It sounds like you've covered it all, but just, within the last 2 weeks, we've lost 6 students. We have another student who we've just gone through our CDS transition meetings. We have a couple of students who have the opportunity to stay under CDS, under the 676 provision, and they're making that decision, and likely they'll make the decision to stay. So that'll be another number down. So I feel like it's the right decision based on how, our current situation of decision making. I think these are fine numbers for us to work with.
Thank you. And then my other question was for the expanded offerings for the stipends, the robotics and the civil rights. Would those still be offered? Would the teachers still be committed to offering those even if there's no stipend in the budget, or would those be basically they wouldn't exist?
I anticipate they would. Civil rights team has existed as long as I've been at Mass Landing, so 5 years. Robotics is in its kind of second, it had a kind of soft start of a year, and this is the first full year. So the folks who have kind of informally been in those advisor positions haven't expressed to me anything other than that they will continue to do that work because they believe it's great for kids to have those opportunities.
Thank you. Candy.
I have 2 things. One, thank you so much for all the hard work. This is very, very difficult. And I just want to put in my 2 cents about the pre-K and how important that is to kids' education, that we make sure that we at least look at that at next year's budget. The other thing is that I talked to Becky, and she mentioned some of it about how important it is to get out the word about what's happening with all of this, the communication to the citizens of the 3 towns. So we know now that there'll be an article in the Forecaster. Do we know yet, will there be anything in the Times Record or the Press Herald?
I don't think we know.
Okay, we need to look into that. And
Candy, I've contacted the Times Record, and I'm still waiting to hear back from that.
Okay.
And I don't know, probably Alex can tell us how. I'm not sure how connected the Forecaster is now to the Press Herald. I don't know if you want to call on him or not, Michelle.
Question. Yeah, we'll follow up with you on that one, Candy.
All right. Okay. And Becky, when is this letter, whatever, planning to go out to everybody? Do you have a time frame for that?
Well, we have to create it.
Yeah.
I couldn't create it till you guys vote on it.
Right.
And then I'm looking to Jenny to get me some information because it has to go to the printer.
Right.
And then, it's going to be like we anticipate that it'll be like a 1-page, here it is, fold it, and then it's mailed.
Right, right.
But we definitely want it to reach all of our households before the annual budget meeting. So that's our goal.
Okay. So my other question is then to the rest of the board, Are there any other things that go on in the 3 towns or any other ways you think we ought to try to get the word out? I know Durham has a news blast thing. We could put something in that. Any other thoughts about any way to get this out? This has been really hard work, and it's important for taxpayers to see what the board has done, what Becky and all of her help has done, all the administrators, and looking to do this. Any other thoughts about how else we could communicate?
Durham has that All Things Durham Facebook page. I don't know
That's
if
true.
Pownell. I think Pownell has one. I'm not 100%
Yeah.
sure about either.
I think Freeport has one as well. And I am going to completely agree with you, Candy, that we need to do a good job of getting it out there. But I just want to keep us focused first on what we're going to tell them. So let's.
When I talked to Becky, Becky said she would put together what the message would be to get out in these different things.
Yeah, for sure. And Alex did pop into the chat that the article would run in the Times Record at least also.
When the Times Record.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So.
And then
Facebook,
any other thoughts about any other things that go on in the towns or the schools to get out the information?
Candy, let's figure out what we're going to do for the budget first, and then we can circle back to how we're going to communicate it.
All right.
I think we just want to make, I completely agree, but I just think we want to focus on one task at a time, if you will, and then we'll focus on how we get those, how we get the message out.
Okay.
You strategic communications chair, you.
Right.
Maddie.
Just a comment on the new enrichment with the visiting authors. I just want to encourage the teachers to reach out to local folks, ACAF. We have a lot of authors in our community who, and I know that we have programming and we typically bring back the same authors year after year, but I'm sure we have some local folks who would be willing to volunteer their time, or we might even have, ACAF might have some funding for that. So look to resources.
Great, thank you. Vali, just I see a hand up from the public, and I saw a comment in the chat. Just so folks know, and sorry if you missed it at the beginning, we have 2 public comment periods in our agenda. One is at the start, well, not the very start, but number 7 on the agenda, and then we have one after our existing and new business. So there will be another opportunity for public comment, but not during the deliberation of the board. So sorry about that. Is it Vali? Vali.
Thank you. So I really appreciate this effort. I would like to have a rundown for an alternative that is still super responsible, because it's still negative increase for Durham and Pownell and very slight increase for the impact for Freeport. And that would be doing everything that is proposed here, except leave the literacy RTI position funded, the EdTech math position funded, and the pre-K funded, the teacher and the EdTech. And the reason why I want to see those numbers, because I run the numbers and they still look super responsible. And I think for our students, those supports are incredibly important, especially coming out of a year when the gap has been widening between the students who are achieving and the ones who are not. And I just want to make sure that we have the supports in place to be able to catch everybody up and get them all on the same page, all the students on the same page at the beginning of the year. So to me, that is super important. I think these are very worthwhile investments, and the numbers really, really justify having those positions to provide for our students a service that they will need to be able to achieve a level that we can be proud of. So we can see those numbers. I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
So what are the add backs that you're looking at, or what you said you calculated it because we'd sent out the
and I had calculated with the teacher and Moore Street, so I didn't know what was going on with Moore Street. So I don't have the numbers now, but basically it's the 4 lines, the 4 items under the expanded programming category.
Okay, so it's 104,000.
Right.
So am I understanding you all, because I didn't hear you speak specifically about the Pownell Elementary Pre-K. Are you wanting that back in, Valley?
Yes, so I
Okay.
would want to basically have universal pre-K, because a lot of families won't be able to afford private pre-K, and it would be super important for those kids to not fall farther behind because their parents can't afford to send them to pre-K. And then the 2 supports, the literacy RTI, which we hear from parent surveys repeatedly that is an area of need that we need to address at Mass Landing School. And then the 8th grade math, we have seen over the years that we have been lagging behind, and we've been trying to catch up to where we want to be relative to our surrounding districts. And that position and that effort has been sustained over the years, and that position has been something that we've been talking about for a few years. And I really would love to see that in, especially considering that the numbers really justify what is a very small expense considering everything else that we're cutting. I'm very confident that this budget will have the support of the 3 communities, even with those small positions still funding.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Scott, is it 104? Okay. So Scott, if we add we'll give you a few minutes to do that. I think we have other questions to take. And
Yeah, and I just wanted to this might be a good point to remind folks or let folks know who haven't been involved in our conversation around the direction that we provided you at the last board meeting to provide the between 0 and 2%, assuming that the towns returned the assessment from that we gave back to the towns, right? So they used it to offset taxation for the upcoming year. And so when we're talking about, you know, a flat or negative, your mic is still on, so I don't know if it's picking me up on both, but
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I just hear myself in my headphones, so it must be coming from across the room. So when we're talking about, you know, that Becky has it at the top of her sheet there, in terms of the impact to before, or if the towns return the assessment versus keep the assessment, and to the best of our knowledge right now, Durham and Freeport have said that they're going to return it. I think Pownell was not 100% if they were or they weren't, if they were going to use it to offset other things. So that's why the boxes are highlighted the way they are. So Durham and Freeport have said that they're returning that assessment. So we're using those calculations versus the Pownell one. So Susanna.
Thank you. I just wanted to, a couple points. One is Spartan Valley, and I came up with some of the similar calculations looking at the data, and support her for some of the similar reasons that she articulated. 2 other things I wanted to question. One was discussion of basically payments that had been in, or items that had been in the budget this year, deferring those to next year. And one concern that I have that I believe was stated at the previous meeting was we have some idea of what the economic situation is right now. We don't know what the economic situation is going to be and where we're going to be. And I just want a little bit, I think if the things that we can defer paying, I fully support that. I don't want to put us in situations where we end up next year being stuck needing to make payments that we're not going to be able to. I don't want to dig us into a hole in a way that may not be the best way to go about it, but I don't want to balance that with, you know, if we can defer payments, I think that's preferable. And the second So I guess that's just a cautionary question. And the second is whether there's been any discussion on a second staff furlough day or not, and whether that's off the table. I know the current reductions that came through over the weekend include 1 day, and I just don't know where that stands.
So, so I don't think to answer your first question, I don't think we're digging any hole that we can't get ourselves out of, or like deferring, having some of the computers be 1 year older. I don't think that that's a huge sacrifice. I think you heard Jim talk about, if we were able to buy extra computer, when we created this budget, we thought, well, if we could buy some extra computers that we would have available for our subs or more for our ed techs, that would be nice. It's a nice to have. It's not a have to have. All of our staff that will be doing remote learning or really, needing to have a computer, they will have one. So I think the things that we're deferring, we were very careful about what things we're suggesting there. The second furlough day, if the board directs us to take a second furlough day, we'll take a second furlough day. Asking, our families have been impacted just as all of your families have been impacted, right? So even though we are very fortunate as educators to have our jobs protected, we realize how lucky we are in times like this. Many of our staff are living with spouses and partners that are impacted just as the general public is, that they have layoffs, they're already having salaries cut. So I feel like our staff has just been exceptional during this time. I feel like we have offered education to our students that is far superior to many of the districts throughout the state. So to require our staff to take another furlough day, I guess I would push back and say, for what purpose? Are we trying to get to negative 2% now? And if so, then I would request again, is there a way, we're out of time. So there really isn't a way for us to go back and revisit the budget. We heard loud and clear at the last board meeting that you wanted to make sure that we looked at something that was impacted staff salaries, and this does that. And I also think about what Kate said about, we're far from out of the woods. And so if we need to find more money in October, I just think it's smart to have that there so that we can draw upon that. I have met with the association with Nancy Dyer, who it really, is the head person with the support staff. And she has agreed that I'll write the salary agreement in such a way that signals to staff that they're going to be guaranteed a certain amount of days, but the other 1.5 days will depend on how the economy is doing and what happens with our subsidy. So that's why you're not seeing a second furlough day on here. Is it possible? It absolutely is possible because because of the way our contracts read. We could definitely do another furlough day if that is the desire of the board. It's hard for me to recommend expanded programming at the expense of the staff that will be providing that expanded programming. So that is not my recommendation that is before you, but it's definitely can be done if that is the wish of the board.
Thank you.
Lindsay.
I just want to thank all of you for the work that you've done and going back and looking at this, and on top of the work that you're doing with remote learning, which I know has been huge. And I would agree with Dr. Foley that you guys have gone above and beyond in a really, really challenging time. So thank you for the work you've done and going back and looking at the budget and all the ways that you have made cuts. I think I would not be in favor of asking another furlough day. I really like that you've got kind of a buffer built in with the additional savings, because we have no idea what we're facing or what's still to come. So I like taking a more, I don't know, I like leaving it as an option for later if we had to. So I guess I just wanted to say that's where I stand with that. And I thank you all for the work you did. I really, I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Mara.
I echo everyone else's gratitude. Thank you so much. I have a couple of questions and then just a comment. I would be in favor of doing the new stipends for the teachers who are doing that work for their robotics and the civil rights clubs. I just feel that if that's something they're supporting, they deserve those stipends. And then my one question was to follow up on what the superintendent just said. Becky, when you say you wouldn't recommend a furlough day at the expense of expanded programming, did you mean even one furlough day, or because I'm in favor of keeping the expanded programming for some of the reasons that have already been given. And I think that we talked about the Durham expanded pre-K because there was a wait list, right? There was a wait list enough to fill a whole class. And I just wanted to confirm that that's still the case, and that those are families who could potentially be saving money on childcare by having their kids in pre-K. So a couple of questions, I guess, in there, if you can decipher them.
I'll start with asking Principal Pidden to give me the latest numbers. I know he gave them to me in an email, but could you, who knows, that changes every day. Could you give us the latest, Will?
Sure. We actually, it's gone up since this conversation first started. I don't think this evening, but within the last month. So we now have 45 children registered for 32 slots. The additional half-time position would give us capacity for 48, and live births from 4 years ago, that crossover between those 2 years was between 41 and 48. So this is a number that is sort of right in that sort of anticipated ballpark.
I'm sorry, could you remind me about Pownell? I forgot to ask about, I could not recall. Thanks, Will. I could not remember what that was for.
The fifth day at Pownell is just really to create, it's an equity issue. It's something that we're able to offer at the other two schools for the students that are struggling a little bit more in pre-K. And so that would offer a fifth day at Pownell, so that when they have students that are struggling in pre-K, then those students can attend 3 days instead of 2. Your other question, Mara, I'm not sure I'm ready for it, but I'll kind of just go with my gut. It is hard to ask to expand programming when we're requesting the staff to take an anticipated reduction. I think that it's one that we can live with the 1 day. I think that we recognize that many other staff members, many other community members are having to make sacrifices, and we're more than happy to do our share. But it is a little bit tough to say we're going to expand programming. But I agree. I think the Durham one is, you can see that was the it was pretty painful. And we talked about, we rank ordered these as an administrative team, and we moved things around. And I think that is the, equally as painful to see kids who are needing pre-K at a time like this, when maybe they can't afford to do a private pre-K to go without it. So that was, I would say that was a equally painful cut.
Susanna.
Yeah, I just guess want to clarify if I came across last time in favor of a second furlough day, and that's not the case. It was more just a clarification on where that stood, as that is something that had been raised before. And in the documents that came around over the weekend, it did include one, and I just wanted to know where that stood. So you answered that well, thank you. And I didn't want to deny the impact of the economy on anybody, because that's impacting everyone in various ways. So thank you for your clarification.
Yes, and I would say that when we started out, I really thought we would probably have to use 2.5 days to get to this number, but that's why when you have time to think creatively and look deep within a budget, I was happy to see that we landed at a place where we didn't need to use all 2.5 days.
Yeah, and thank you for taking that time and that lateral thinking and going forward with the team.
You're welcome.
Jen.
Hi. I just wanted to agree that I'm not 100% with the second furlough day either. I think it's good to keep that in the background, but I do 100% appreciate that they agreed to do one furlough day. I think that's awesome. I also about the 4 items that are in the expanded, let me move my thing over so I can see it. The expanded programming, especially the pre-K, for all the reasons that everyone has said, that seems to be kind of a starting point for our kids in the RSU. And I would hate to see that, go away. So that's all.
Vali.
Yeah, and I wanted to make just a comment about asking the teachers for a furlough day and expand programming. I would rather call this 4 items something else, really, because expanding programming, it is an expansion of pre-K, but we already offer pre-K in other schools. So it's a question of equity more than expanded programming. So I really would like to call it equity or equal services for all young students, or something that doesn't sound as though we're expanding into new different areas that are not necessary at this point. And likewise, for the other 2 support positions, I think teachers will really appreciate having that support. Even though they have to give up a furlough day, I think their daily lives when they're in school and instructing students in their classrooms will be a lot easier and lighter if they have access to those 2 positions. I think it's been very documented that the need is there. So it's addressing a need more than expanding a program. It's not a new program, it's just a need that we have identified over the years. So really feel that we should address. Yeah, and I feel like we can address it now. I'm curious to hear from other board members if they feel that way too.
I'm wondering if Scott has the number.
For which?
For if we added the 104,000 in, or do you need a few more minutes?
So if we add the 104 in, want the
What numbers are the board looking for in terms of impact? Are we looking for the expenditure increase? Are we looking for the impact pre and post returned assessment?
I'd like to see the impact with the return assessment first, and then also without. but definitely the impact to the taxpayer, those two categories.
Okay.
Thank you.
So relative to the mill, if we were to basically, for those that are, if you're looking at that Excel worksheet I sent out, the additional expenditure reductions, Becky's sheet that she gave us included $551,000 of expenditure reductions. So if you just change that to $447,000 of reductions, that's going to give you the impacts. So for Durham, after the assessment was returned, it's minus 0.91%. For Freeport, after the assessment is returned, it's positive 0.25%. And in Pownell, it would be negative if they return the assessment, but that's not our understanding of their plan. So I don't necessarily think we want to put that out there as the likely scenario if that's not the indication we've seen from the town. So so there's if they didn't return the assessment, which is what we most likely scenario that we right now for them would be a positive 0.14% increase to the mill. So those are all relative to the mill rates based on, remember, this is based on the April 1st 2019 valuations. There was some discussion around can we use 2020 valuations? Are they available? They are not available in Durham and Pownell and won't be until likely July, according to the town offices. And we haven't heard back from Freeport on if and when they would be available. So we used consistent numbers for all three towns, which is how we've traditionally done the budget. We went back and confirmed those numbers from the tax commitments from all three towns last year. So those are the valuations according to the tax commitment books. So for those that were interested in those little details. Beth.
Hi. For some reason, I can't get that spreadsheet. It's probably because I'm doing it on my phone, but I can't enter numbers and play with it to see what
Probably
it
have to
does.
enable editing at the top, but.
Okay. Anyway, so when you're talking about the mill rate, so is that what the tax impact is? When you're saying tax impact, like when you say on the budget sheet, tax impact for this town, that's what you're referring to is the impact of the mill rate?
Right. So the mill rate is, what each town would pay, a taxpayer would pay in the individual towns per $1,000 of valuation, right? So the percentages we're talking about are increases and or decreases to that mill rate.
Okay, and it's going off the mill rate for this year, is that correct? So,
no, it's all based on the 2019 because we don't know the 2021 yet.
Okay, I'm sorry, that's what I meant as 2019. I should have said that.
Yep.
Okay, so the current current.
Yes,
year
what we're living in today. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And so Durham would go down, you said, by 0.91%.
Yep.
Percent. Okay, and Freeport up 0.25% and Pownell up 0.14%, you said?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I had that right. Thank you very much.
Yep. Valley.
Sorry, my hand was up from before, but unless anyone else has a comment, I would like to make a motion that we adopt this budget with those changes that we just talked about. And I'm sure you have a better motion written up, Michelle. But if you want to read it with a new number, I will second it.
So
the motion and somebody else.
Yeah, right. So consideration and approval to amend the FY21 board adopted budget that was adopted at the April 1st, 2020 board meeting. So you would want to amend that to.
Yes. So I would like to make a motion to amend that to reduce the total savings by $104,000 in order to keep the 4 items in the expanded programming category funded for the fiscal year 21 budget.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Was that the
Suzanne?
right math? Was that correct? Was that the correct math? Because aren't we amending the budget that we already adopted in April? So
well, I think it
440 something, not 104.
Well, I mean, if the motion is read to consideration and approval of the revised as presented, which would be what Becky provided, which is, okay, so we have a second from Susanna. Okay, so, all right, so we have a motion, we have a second. We have questions. I know we have folks that have requested to be able to weigh in prior to a vote. I think that is while these are unusual circumstances. I think that I think our protocol is that people have the opportunity to speak at the beginning to provide their input prior to the discussion, to to make their feelings known about a subject, and then they have an opportunity again after. And I don't think we have in our protocol, in our policy, it doesn't include public comment mid conversation. We do have certain meetings where we have that opportunity, but this is
Shame on you.
I apologize, but
No,
unfortunately,
that's not public.
you know, our school board meetings are open to the public. They are not a public session. Unfortunately, that is how the law is written for this. So we certainly do want input and welcome it via email at the beginning.
No, you don't. You don't welcome. You don't welcome input. No, you don't welcome input. If you would, you would have discussion after your discussions pre-vote.
So I hear you. I understand your frustration, but
Well, no, you don't. You don't seem to recognize it. If you understand it, recognize.
I do recognize it, but we have a policy, and that's what we're going to continue with.
Well, don't cut me off in mid-discussion then. You mute me out, unilaterally.
So Mr. Dean, I'm just going to ask, if we were having a public meeting, we'd ask for folks in the
So when will the public meeting be on this vote?
So I'm saying in person, you would have the opportunity during public.
When will the public meeting be on this vote?
June 17th is the annual budget meeting for the 3 towns to change or amend up or down the whole budget, and then it goes.
So you're accepting no comment at this time.
Not
on your discussions to date.
It's a board discussion, yes.
Why have it on Zoom? Why have it on the public? Why bother if you're not going to take comment?
So I apologize, you missed the comment period at the beginning, but unfortunately that is
the comments period is the beginning. Then you have your 2.5-hour meeting with everybody speaking, and nobody's allowed to comment on those remarks. What anyone says. How is that in any way representative?
Okay, so I would suggest we take the conversation offline. I'm happy to have a conversation with you about the process of the public board meeting and how the policy is written, but we need to continue on. So I would ask that we have the public remain on mute.
Well, thank you very much for that. The opportunity for the public to make an input.
Okay. Okay, so do we have any board questions or comments about the motion on the floor to amend?
Is there anybody from the board who would like to permit public comment?
Okay. So we have a motion, we have a second. I hadn't weighed in on the proposed recommendations from the superintendent or the motion to amend that upward by the 104. I think that what has been proposed met the mandate of what we had requested of getting the impact to the three towns, as close to zero as we feel is possible without materially impacting the education of the children. While I agree that the impact of adding in those 104 to the average taxpayer or to the mill is not huge. I do feel slightly concerned about the sort of jumping around from, they provided us the list sort of in their order of the recommendation, and the idea of having the furlough day while also adding positions. I'm torn on the pre-K because I do see that may actually have a financial benefit to families. That the ability for the pre-Kers to attend school. So I'm torn on that. I don't know. I would prefer to keep the recommendation as it was presented from the superintendent. Knowing that our goal over time, and it's been a process that we've worked at through the years of increasing pre-K access in the district. And while ideally we'd have it be, essentially at universal, I'm not sure this is the year that we can make that decision. And so I would prefer to keep it as presented with the 551 in savings, but that's my take on it. So, Kate.
I just wanted clarification on the motion.
Okay. So the motion on the floor is to amend the budget that was proposed to use $389,000 of additional undesignated fund balance and to reduce the expenditures in the district by $447,010.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. And I don't see any other board hands up. Nope, Jen. She got her hand up right the last second.
Sorry, so after you just mentioned that, I just wanted a clarification. I'm trying to do this split screen here of the piece that Becky sent out. And so is it my understanding, or am I wrong in the fact that everything goes in order of, I think I'm confused as to because I had talked about keeping expanded programming, but was this list in order of Becky and the administration putting expanded programming as a more painful cut above the salary savings or below, or was that not a discussion? Was that not a?
It's in the order of, we start with the things that are least painful.
Okay, the easiest stuff. So we're looking at the alternative, the savings, the reduction in funding, enrollment, equipment savings. So having the salary savings, the furlough day, as being one of the more painful items, correct?
Correct.
Not painful, but you know what I mean. That's how the list is going, correct?
And I do think that those are the words I used.
Sorry,
everyone the least desired, froze. I guess you could say too.
Mm-hmm.
You good, Jen? Oh, everybody froze on me again.
No, just Jen.
Oh yeah, you're right. It is just Jen. Okay. Candy. Oh, you're not mute. You're muted still.
I just wanted to ask again to be clear what we're voting on now. Are we voting on leaving the expanded programs in there, or are we voting on, I'm not sure what we're voting on.
Whoa, my meeting just canceled me right out. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
It says my meeting will start in a few seconds.
Oh.
Interesting. Okay.
We can hear you. We can hear you, Michelle, if you can hear us.
Yeah.
Okay, I can hear you. So I guess I'll just go with that for right now. Okay, there it is. Yes, so the motion on the floor adds back in those 4 line items that are titled expanded
Okay.
programming, but maybe they're not quite expanded programming.
Right. Okay.
Is that your only question, Candy? Yeah, okay. Jen.
Sorry, I lost my internet. I don't know what happened. I just wanted to say, so it doesn't look like I'm crazy, that even though I said about the expanded programming, I feel like if that's like sort of a pick and choose and that wasn't the bottom of the list, I don't really feel comfortable doing that either. I feel like we either need to like leave it the way it is or start at the very bottom. So that's just my thought at this point.
Okay. Okay, so the motion on the floor is to reduce the budget by the items outlined in Superintendent Foley's handout, excluding those 4 line items. So if that's the motion on the floor that folks want to vote on, we'll vote on that now. If someone wanted to amend it to change it back to Becky's, you could do that now, or you could vote down. I'm just talking process here because people seem to have questions about the 2 ways it could go. So you could make an amendment. You could make a motion to amend Valley's motion to eliminate those 4 items and be back to Becky's, which would need a second. You would then vote on that amendment. And if it passes, then the motion becomes the new motion on the floor. If it fails, we're back to the original motion. We do this every year with the budgets. It's this is where we need Lindsay Sterling and her Robert's rules. She's really good at this. I'm guessing Jen got cut off somehow because they look like they're trying to figure out their internet. Valley.
So we can do what you just explained, which gets a little complicated, or we can just vote on this one and then vote on the next one and then vote on the next one so we know exactly what we're voting on.
Yeah, that is okay. So everybody good? No more questions? Everybody's ready to vote? Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. I think everyone currently understands it. I have again lost my list of voting people. Oh, here we go. So we will do our roll call vote. Kate.
No.
Jeremy.
Yes.
Candy.
No.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Jen.
This is for the amended.
It's not an amended motion. There's only one motion on the floor. But
I'm sorry. I kept going in and out, so I didn't really hear. So I feel awful. Sorry.
No, that's okay. So the motion we're voting on is to, well, I guess we're amending the original adopted budget.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
By the amount laid out in Becky's memo.
Right.
Excluding those 4 items under expanded programming.
So if I want to keep the original budget that was put out, I would vote no.
Correct.
Correct. No.
Okay. Susanna.
Yes.
Beth.
No.
Mara.
Yes.
I vote, I am voting. This is hard because I do want to amend the original budget. It's hard to say that I want to vote no, which makes it sound I want to keep the original budget. But it's hard. I am in favor of the reductions, but I think they need to be a little bit more. But I'm going to vote. This is hard this way. See, it was easier to just amend it, and then we know if people want to make the change. I'm going to vote yes. Valley. Maddie.
Yes.
And Ray is not on. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm looking to Cynthia because she's usually keeping our count. I think it passes.
Okay, I didn't hear Volley's vote.
Valley's was a yes.
And Maddie's was a yes, so it passes.
Maddie's.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yep.
7, 4.
7. Yep, it passes.
Okay. So that passes. And so we have now amended the budget. And we have those impact numbers. And I know Alex is waiting for those, so we'll get those to him because I know he's putting that article out tomorrow. So we'll get those to him this evening so that can move out. And so I just wanted to circle back to Candy's question or suggestions about the communication of the changes to the budget. So now that we know what we have changed it to, we can discuss how we get that out there. Valley.
So we are scheduled to have a strategic communications meeting this Friday. So we could look at any draft that Becky and the administrators produce and then share with the board before it goes out to any media outlets or, to all the family and households and community members. And I suppose you may go to the media as well.
Yep. And if any of our board members have any brilliant ideas on ways that they think we can successfully share the information with the communities. If you have them now, feel free to share them. If they come to you at 3 a.m, feel free to email the Strategic Communications Committee, and they can compile those and come up with a plan for that going forward. Anyone have any? Oh, Maddie's hands up. Oh, and Jen too. Sorry, Maddie first.
I'm not going to talk about social media. It might be a good idea for Becky to write a letter to the editor of Portland Press Herald as well, and maybe align that with that strategic communication draft that the committee will work on Friday, because that will also give us a link that we can post on social media.
Okay, Jen.
That's a good idea with that Maddie just said about Becky creating something so all of us can then kind of put it out on social media. I think that's a great idea. But just so I'm super clear, so what just got passed was all the cuts that were in the original blast, with the exception of the 4 the 4 pieces that were in the expanded programming, which we wanted to rename kind of equity programming. Am I right on that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay, so we will leave it in the capable hands of our strategic communications group. I have no idea where my agenda is. Here we go.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so new business 13A, consideration and approval of the comprehensive education plan. Cynthia. Oh, Becky. What? Oh, 12C. The added, oh, I didn't write that down. Yeah, 12C. Sorry.
Okay, I think we have just a lot of paper flying, so I think Michelle and I are both struggling a little bit. So I think that I want to talk about the calendar, which I'm now shuffling through my papers to find the calendar. All right. So I would like to talk about, I'm going to propose ending student learning on June 12th to have the board consider that, which is a week earlier than I anticipated, probably a month ago when we started this remote learning. This was a difficult decision for me to make because I think that every day counts when you're talking about student learning. But we've also begun to get feedback from parents saying that, this is really hard. And so I also have started, as Cumberland County superintendents, we've started talking about what is September going to look like. And that's not going to be, I don't think, as simple as just all of the kids returning, because I don't think the virus will have disappeared. So that would give us, if we ended student learning on June 12th, that would give us a week with our staff to allow for the preparation for when our students return in September. It would also allow us to get materials returned. We have a lot of computers out there that we have loaned out to families. We need to get those back so we can re-image and do the repairs needed. We have curriculum that needs to be realigned because it will come as no surprise to you that, we haven't been able to keep up with all of our pacing because it's been a very different kind of learning. So we need to decide, where did our kids end in June and where should we begin? So that might require us, teaching some units that we didn't get to in September before we begin where we normally begin in September. We have some trainings that we can do. Every year we have staff review policies. We can get that out of the way here at the end of the year so that when we come back in August on those last 2 days, that they can be more focused on putting whatever guidelines we need to have in place for whatever learning needs to take place. We still need to close up our rooms. When we left in March, we really thought maybe it was only going to be a couple of weeks, and then we thought maybe a month, and it's kind of turned into now we're out. And so we still need to have, a lot of teachers left not knowing that that would be the last time they'd be in their classroom. So we need to do that. And I just think we need to recognize that this has been really heavy lifting. And again, I want to thank our staff for the exceptional work that they've done. And so kind of for all of those reasons, that's why I'm making this proposal. We've talked about it as an administrative team. We have very different needs at different buildings for different reasons. So it's not as if it's going to look exactly the same in every building. So we're going to leave that up to the principals to do what is best needed for their staff so that when we come back in September, that that we're ready to go. So that is why I would like for you to consider this proposal and amend our calendar to June 12th, which basically means that we're not making up the snow days for the most part. So thank you for discussing this in advance.
Valley? Oh, okay. I don't even see her on mine. I see Beth and Kate, but Valley's first.
Thank you, Becky, for bringing this up. My question is, the last meeting, the plan seemed to be very strong, that because the gap is widening because the students who are learning and the ones who are not, we needed those 2 weeks to basically support the students who are falling behind. We don't do that now. Are we confident that we can have summer school, or what other alternative method do we have for supporting those students so they can get caught up before the beginning of next year?
So I don't think this is changing. I mean, obviously it's shaving off a week, but I think our plans to do something different in June is still, I think, you know, I guess I'm looking for head nods from my principals. I think that's still the current plan. And I know that Jen, that they're working hard at the high school, because we basically said we're not failing. I mean, it's really incomplete. So I think we have plans in place to support those students. We're hoping to offer a summer school. There are still a lot of questions that we don't have answered from the DOE. And so that means I can't give you a really good answer either. I know that Bonnie and I have been in conversations about our ESY students, and we're planning on having in-person instruction for our functional life skills. But you know, we're hoping to offer, of course, we can do remote learning for summer school, but you know, people are kind of burned out of that, and we know that for a lot of our learners, that's not the best way to make up the gap. So I think it's just going to be kind of one student at a time, and there's going to be a lot of discussions, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll get clarity from the DOE, and then we can plan accordingly. And as always, we always take kids from where they're at. And as you know, we've expanded over the last few years our RTI programs, our support programs. I know the ed tech at the high school will help put back the math lab. So those supports will be in place. So I think in RSU 5, we're really fortunate with the supports we have in place. So I feel confident that we can help those kids with gaps.
The second question I had is, since everyone is nearing burnout stage right now, will these 5 days for the teachers be the most productive they can be, or do we possibly just say give them 2.5 or 2 days now and make 2.5 or 3 of those days flex, so they can have small group meetings with the principals during the summer, you know, when they're more fresh, and then we can do it in person and they can actually really use this time very productively?
I think that'll have to be a very kind of volunteer thing, because you're going across 2 years and 2 contracts, right? And so, you know, I did propose that to the association, and we didn't really arrive at any, you know, I mean, we recognize the complexity of that, but I think that if it's voluntary, we can definitely do that. So, you know, if staff said, I'll give you 2 days, you know, we're burnt out now, but we want to align this curriculum and we'll work 2 days in July, I would think that the association would be, you know, open to kind of discussing that. And so I think, you know, to me, the vote really tonight would be around amending it to end student learning June 12th, and to know that those other 5 days would be staff days that we would work out with the staff.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate having a little more context to know what's going to happen with those 5 days. So thank you.
Yep.
Beth.
I just wanted to say that I am in support of this. I feel, like you say, it's been an extremely heavy lift for the teachers. I know they don't really get those days off, but the teachers as well as the students. And like we've talked a lot about the socio-emotional stuff going on. I know just from my own experience, it's been a really, really tough one with a little one. So, I feel for everybody, and I'm just extremely grateful that you and the whole team cares so much about the kids, that you don't want to let them slip through the cracks. You don't want to let them slide as much as possible. But I think, again, this is probably a good decision. So I'm definitely in support of that. So thank you.
Kate.
Surprise, I think this is a terrible idea. So I don't agree with anybody else probably that's in this meeting. Because I don't agree with cutting the school year short, though I do realize that remote learning hasn't really risen to the expectations that I had for it, which I think also is probably not a surprise for folks in this meeting. I don't have the same rave reviews for remote learning, so I guess I would agree that the quality just isn't there at this point, or never was. So certainly there have been some teachers that have risen to the challenge, certainly not all of them. So I'm just gonna express that I have a dissenting view on this, and I'll be voting no.
Okay, Lindsay.
I am definitely in favor of it, and it's certainly for my own self, for my kiddos, and the circle of people that I talk to. I think we're all fried, and I think that's all of us. Superintendent, right on down to our littlest learners. I think we're all fried right now, and I think it's a wise social, emotional, mental health call for everyone. There's no learning crisis. I think kids are going to learn as much about life as they can from just going through this whole experience. So I don't see that there's a lack of learning that's going to happen from pulling snow days back. I'm glad to see it being considered, and I'm 100% in favor of it for everybody's benefit.
Beth.
I just wanted to ask Kate specifically that if you feel that the remote learning isn't up to what you want it to be, why you feel like it's most important to have those last few days.
Am I allowed?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Because we were looking at transitioning to something a little bit different, and I thought maybe that perhaps would give an opportunity for us to get something a little bit better out of it, because we were looking at transitioning, I think, at the end of the year to something less of more with projects or with the specialists, which have been totally absent in a lot of cases here. So I was looking forward to that, kind of changing it up and getting some more face time with those teachers that haven't been present thus far.
So the plan is to still do some type of learning like that. It just wouldn't be, it would be a week shorter. And I do want to clarify what I said when I think that our staff have risen to the occasion and gone above and beyond. I don't think remote learning is ideal. I mean, this is not, what any of us signed up for. I mean, there are schools that are out there that are virtual schools, but none of us are working at those. So I just want to clarify that I'm not saying that I think that remote learning is an exceptional way of going about learning. I just feel like our staff have worked really hard. I feel like when I look statewide that our staff in RSU 5 were one of the few that were up and running within like 3 days. I feel like we are, you know, we fed the kids almost immediately. I think we have done a really good job when presented with a very difficult situation. And there's always room for improvement. This was brand new learning. When you think about new programming or expanded programming, you know, you would never try to put something in place this quickly, right? Because you're right, it's not perfect. I don't want to pretend to anybody out there that we think that we're doing a perfect job with remote learning, but I feel like we are doing the best that we can with what we have. Thank you.
Jen.
I would agree. I would go for the new date as well. Being someone who has high school and college kids, I feel extremely lucky. And knowing how, you know, just how hard it has been on everybody. 100%. I also feel like we may never have a snow day again because we have all this new technology. So I'm in support, and I just have to add this because I don't know when another time would be, but when I got a "that's awesome" from my senior after she read the email about the graduation, I can breathe now, and I haven't for a couple months. So I just wanted to add that, and thank you.
Will.
I just wanted to clarify that when we've been talking about the potential for this conversation, our intention, Kate, is not to eliminate that work that we described. It's just it will occur a week sooner because that's what will move forward. So what we anticipate is condensing the academic work of the next few weeks, but still providing that work with the specialists prior to the end of the year.
Maddie.
I think the concept of rave reviews is not necessarily about the rave reviews that I am giving our district, the administration staff. It is not necessarily about the quality of the learning. It's about the quality of the intent and the effort. I think that Lindsay is right. I think we're all fried. I'm certainly fried. My student at home, who's typically a very engaged learner, struggling. I mean, this is tough for all different kinds of learners, and we rolled it out really quickly, maybe a little too quickly, but we didn't miss a beat because our kids couldn't afford to see us miss a beat. And I'm proud of us, and I think that this will, I think this is the break our teachers need too. I think they will welcome that time to pause and not have to struggle with remote teaching for a week and just reflect with one another on what they've gone through and what they may have to take into September, depending on what's coming. And I think we owe them that. So I'm definitely in support of this proposal.
Valley.
I'm also in favor of having this reduction in the 5 days to the calendar year. And just piggybacking on to what Maddie said, our staff has done the best they could. It's just the limitation of the tool that they're using are very real. And I think we're all realizing that what seemed to be an easy way to teach, it's actually very difficult. So this takes nothing away from all the students and all the staff who have been working super hard and very diligently to make the best they can. But it's just the online tool is what it is, and we can really change that. So thank you for bringing it up, and I'm agreeing with those changes.
Kate.
I guess I would just respectfully disagree with everything that everybody just said. I think that people deal with things in different ways, and it hasn't been all that challenging here at home for me to deal with it. And I've yearned for my kids to have something more structured, see more effort from some teachers than I've witnessed. So, I mean, I've expressed my dissatisfaction on that. And so I agree to disagree on that.
Susanna.
I'll just support, echo what Maddie was saying, I think in relation to what Kate was saying about quality and the intent, and teachers with whom I've spoken, parents with whom I've spoken, there's a lot that's gone into this. And I'm very appreciative that, you know, the district got things together, got people together, and got things going with very little warning. And we're able to keep that momentum. And, you know, at the beginning, when thinking these classes might be closed for 2 weeks, not really sure what's up, and then looking forward to sort of an unknown date, and to be able to keep the momentum and to keep people engaged. I know I'm struggling with it, and it's certainly not easy for me, for anybody. So just very grateful for that. With that in mind, I do also support finishing on the 12th of June.
Valerie, do you have another question?
I just wanted to clarify when I say that the effort has been very good from our staff and our teachers, I mean the collective effort. I mean the group effort and the group results. Obviously, they're having teachers who haven't risen to the occasion, and that's the nature of human nature. Not everyone puts out the same effort and the same dedication. So I agree with you that we're not just rating everyone at the top and the top of the scale, but collectively, I believe our staff has done a really, really good job. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay. All right. So with that, do I have a motion for consideration and approval to adjust the adopted 2019-2020 school calendar? Maddie, second from Beth. Any other questions or comments? Okay, so we'll go through the vote. Kate?
No.
Jeremy?
Yes.
Candy?
Yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Mara?
Yes.
I vote yes. Vali?
Yes.
And Maddie?
Yes.
Great, thank you. That motion passes. So now we're on to 13, the comprehensive education plan.
Okay, hello. So you have a handout in your packets, 13A. It's the memorandum that you get yearly at the same time with the updates to our comprehensive education plan. And I have 4 items that are bulleted. Actually, 2 of them are pending. I put them in there because they're so close. We have an update to our personnel plan. And remember, the comprehensive plan includes all of the state and federal plans that we're required to have in a big binder. And so under the personnel plan, we have been working throughout the year on in our PEPG committee to address the what is right now known as SLOs, but we're reworking that to talk about how we're going to incorporate student growth measures. And we've been meeting throughout the year, and we have our what I believe will be our last meeting on Thursday to finalize this document and then bring it to the board for approval on May 27th. So once that it has happened, then that will be added to this plan before the end of this fiscal year. And then in the next one is kind of in the same boat. At our last policy committee meeting, we reviewed IKF graduation requirements, and we have some revisions that we are actually going to have as a separate agenda item on May 27th for the board to discuss. And so that will be coming to you in a couple of weeks. And then once we get to second read, that would be added. And then the two things that have been added, which happen every year, are the gifted and talented. We have to go through the grant application process, and that happens in the fall. So that gets updated yearly. And then the ESSA funds, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is our federal funding that gets funneled through the state. So we have that application that I work on in the summer, and it goes through several processes, and then we add that to this plan as well. So this is just being submitted for your approvals. You need to see this yearly. And it's housed in my office, although I have it right in this office today. So, and it's open for anybody to see at any time once we get through the COVID.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but I meant to tell the administrators that they do not need to stay on unless they are just finding our meeting riveting.
Boom, 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 boom. Any questions for Cynthia on the comprehensive plan? Seeing none, do I have a motion for consideration and approval of the comprehensive education plan? Thank you, Valerie. Second, Beth. All right. Flip the page here. Kate.
Here she comes.
Did I lose her? Oh. It's your vote, Kate.
Yes.
We're voting on the comprehensive education plan. Are you in favor?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't even look up and realize you weren't sitting there. Jeremy.
Yes.
Candy.
Yes.
Thank you. Lindsay.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Susanna.
Yes.
Beth.
Yes.
Mara.
Yes.
I vote yes. Vali.
Yes.
And Maddie.
Yes.
Thank you. What? It's only 9:59. We can get one more thing in before we have to vote. Yeah. So, so the next item, 14 on here, is personnel, which is, it looks really long, but it's actually quite not. The consideration and approval to accept the nomination of the following personnel and to authorize the superintendent of schools to issue contracts for the 2020-2021 year. You'll see there's 3 sets of teachers here. There's teachers going on their second year of probationary contracts, their third year of probationary contracts, and then that last group is those that are going on to continuing contracts, and they won't, we won't see them pop up year to year. I've confirmed, as I do every year, that I don't have to read the names. So if you guys have had a chance to take a look through, if we have that motion. Thank you, Valerie. Second. Mara, thank you. Any questions on what we're voting on, or? Okay. So we will go through the vote. Kate.
Yes.
Jeremy.
Yes.
Candy.
Yes.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Susanna.
Yes.
Beth.
Yes.
Mara.
Yes.
I vote yes. Vali.
Yes.
And Maddie. I guess it's technically 10:01. I'd get away with it if Ginny wasn't sitting here, but so do I have a motion to, so here's what we have left on the agenda, just so folks know. We have, the only thing we have left is it's just the second grade teacher, right?
And public comment.
And public comment. Do we have to vote on that?
No, but if you go on past 10,
Yeah.
you have to, yeah.
Do we have to vote on each thing?
No, just to go past
Just
10.
to go past 10?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So do we have a motion to continue on past 10? Thank you, Maddie. Thank you, Jen. Do I really have to do a vote on that? Oh, I'm going to run out of vote papers here. You didn't give me enough for going past 10. Kate.
Yes.
Jeremy.
Yes.
Candy.
Yes.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Susanna.
Yes.
Beth.
Yes.
Mara.
Yes.
I vote yes. Vali.
Yes.
Maddie.
Yes.
And we all know Naomi votes no. Anyone new to the board may not get that reference, but she hated going past 10 o'clock.
I almost voted no just to channel her for a moment.
She may be watching, you know. Okay, so 14B is the other item that was added as an adjustment for the consideration and approval for the second grade teacher.
Yes, I'm thrilled to recommend Kate Mishu as a second grade teacher at Morris Street. We interviewed her today. She did a great job. She has a degree from Connecticut College in French and Theater, Maddie, and is currently working on her master's at USM in teaching and learning. She's confident, she's creative, she brings great energy to the second grade team. She's a very reflective thinker and has a strong understanding of students and how to support them. So I'm very excited to make this recommendation to you.
Okay, so do I have a motion for consideration and approval to employ a second grade teacher at Moore Street School for the 2020-2021 school year? Beth and Jen, thank you. Question. I think I saw Valley's hand up first.
Good question. Does she have any teaching experience, or this is her first teaching job?
She's just finishing up her student teaching, and so this is really her first teaching job. I know that Julie thinks she's going to be the perfect fit on this team with her energy and kind of her love of teaching.
Oh, you're muted, Valley.
Where will she be starting?
When? In September. Yeah.
September. Okay.
Yes.
Susanna.
Yeah. I didn't realize my hand was up, but I have known Kate for years. And just want to say that she's a really engaging, enthusiastic, excited person who, big theater, not big into interacting with people and bringing people into her world and sharing her passions. And that's something that she has been doing since she was, we were both yay big. So I think she'd be an awesome teacher. And I know this is something that she's been wanting to do for quite a while and has been really enthusiastic about it. So I'll just put that out for her experience and fit for second grade.
All right, thank you. Kate.
I don't have a question. I was making a motion.
I've already made the motion and the second, so I'm calling on you to vote.
Oh, yes.
I did the motion before the questions this time, just to keep you all on your toes. Jeremy.
Yes.
Candy.
Yes.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Susanna.
Definitely yes.
Beth.
Yes.
Mara.
Yes.
I think that was a yes, right? Yeah, okay. I vote yes. Vali.
Yes.
And Maddie.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, welcome. I don't know if she stayed up this late to watch the meeting, but if she did, welcome. If she didn't, she's still welcome. Great. So we are back to public comments. If we have anyone, member of the public that wishes to speak at this time, we just ask that you raise your hand. We'll call on you, ask you to share your name, your town, and comments to 3 minutes. We'll give folks a second to find the little raise hand if they want to share anything. Okay. All right. Well, then I would take a motion for consideration and approval to enter into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056B for the purpose of discussing support staff negotiations for RSU 5. Maddie and Valley, thank you. Ginny had extra sheets for me so we can vote. Kate.
Yes.
I have to say, I think these meetings would be half as long if I didn't have to go through these each time. Jeremy.
Yes.
Candy.
Yes.
Lindsay.
Yes.
Jen.
Yes.
Susanna.
Yes.
Beth.
Yes.
Mara.
Yes.
I vote yes. Vali.
Yes.
And Maddie.
Yes.
Okay, so how we're going to manage the executive session is we are going to ask anyone who is not a board member or Dr. Foley to exit the Zoom meeting, and so we'll give folks a second to do that, and then the board members will continue with our discussion. Hold on, I can't hear.